What is going on to all my Winning Time fans out there, and thank you for clicking on today's video. As you all can see, this is a breakdown and full recap of the entire second and unfortunately final season of the hit show Winning Time. Now, in these breakdowns that we did every single week for the past 7 weeks, these are very insightful, fun commentary on my thoughts of the episode, breaking down the character moments as a fan of basketball, but also a huge lifetime Lakers fan, talking about the authenticity of the recreation of some of the most iconic moments throughout this franchise history and throughout the Showtime dynasty of the Lakers. So I hope you all enjoy this full breakdown of episode 1 all the way to episode 7. But also, I want to just throw in my 2 cents of the matter. I wasn't able to share my commentary on the cancellation of the show because I would record my reviews 2 days prior to the actual premiering. So I had no idea that this was going to be the end of the show. So to that note, it breaks my heart. It sucks, man. I love this show so much. I talked about it every single week. It's not only one of my favorite shows on TV, but it's been one of my favorite shows in the last few years. And I'm just so sad that the actors and the writers and directors won't continue this story that has so many more things to be told. So it really do suck. So as far as speculation goes, I think there's a multitude of reasons why this show was canceled. But 2 things come to mind. Number 1, I feel like there was a huge lack of promotion from HBO, especially considering that we're in the middle of a strike right now. So writers, the actors weren't able to talk about the show they love on a week-to-week basis, and I felt like HBO didn't carry that load to really push it out to the general audience. There were some people that didn't even know the show was back to halfway through this second season, so I think the promotion was lacking on HBO's part. But also, when it comes to that promotion, I follow a lot of the writers and people behind the making of the show, and they would say every week, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram, hey guys, hope you all are enjoying it, but hey, can we get the numbers up? Can you all tune in and watch this excellent show that we have made for you all? And I think it's just the lack of promotion, lack of viewership were probably some key reasons on why this show will not be back on HBO. But that doesn't mean no one else can't pick it up. I'm looking at Netflix, Apple TV Plus, Amazon. There's been crazier things that's happened when shows get canceled and picked back up. But obviously right now with it being a strike, that's pretty hard to do. But again, fingers crossed that someone can pick it up to at least give us a 3rd season to show the Lakers getting their payback on the Celtics. But again, I really do feel so bad for the writers and the actors that weren't able to continue the story because it was just such a great, well-written and acted show. So with all that being said, I hope this could be a video with appreciation that those that love the show like I did, that enjoy these commentaries that I did for the breakdown every single week. So like, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and again, if you're watching this intro, put in the comments right now #BringBackWinningTime. Thank you all again for clicking on this video, and I hope you enjoy the recap. What is going on, Winning Time fans, and welcome back to my channel. Elliot here to break down this second season premiere episode 1, which was titled "One Ring Don't Make a Dynasty." Ain't that the truth? As we see some of those key players who helped win that ring tackle with major change in this premiere episode as the Boston Celtics are ready to take down the Lakers. As we open with the 1984 NBA Finals Game 1 as the Lakers win 115-109 and take a 1-0 lead versus the Boston Celtics as the entire Lakers team and the coaching staff runs to their team bus while the angry Boston fans throw trash at them because, as Magic Johnson points out, they're mad, y'all. Now, losing at home for the Celtics that year was very difficult because that season they dominated at home as they went 33-8. As we see Coach Reilly, for those who didn't notice, Coach Westhead is nowhere to be found because he wasn't the coach during that time. We see Coach Reilly gives them a speech reminding them that they've won championships in the past, as has the Celtics, but this ain't just any old championship ring. They want their ring and they want their hearts with it. As the mob of Celtics fans make their way to the Lakers' white bus, hoping to make Coach Reilly's speech come true in defeating their rivals for the championship. Before moving on, for some of you all that might be wondering, did the Boston Celtics fans really rock the bus? Well, yes, that did happen, but in reality, this happened in Game 7, not Game 1, and according to first-hand accounts, they rocked the vehicle back and forth, throwing beer cans and rocks at the windows, and in his memoir, Magic Johnson recalls being frightened and police had to break up the mob. Now, I personally really like these kind of flash forward openings. If you all recall, last season opened with November 5th, 1991 with Magic Johnson at the doctor's office, and now we have this one. To me, these openers set the main focus of the season, and this being a big indication that the Lakers and Boston Celtics rivalry, which in my opinion is the best rivalry in sports history, and it appears that that will be a major part of this new season. Cut back to 4 years earlier, summer of 1980, months after winning the championship, we see Magic Johnson is literally front and center and taking the lead by storm, which also we see him giving all his magic to all the women. Speaking of women, we learned that Melissa Mitchell, who claims that Magic is the father of her unborn child, which is expected to be born in the middle of the season, but Magic's main focus, when not in between those sheets, is this being his time and trying to repeat as a champion. As his legal team has a plan in place to pay her off to keep her silence, and if she speaks a single word of this or names that baby after him, the plan is to sue her for everything she has. You see that this doesn't sit well with Magic, but the decision must be made after training camp. It's moments like this that really showcase Quincy Isaiah's acting, as he can show you that more egotistical side of that young Magic Johnson, but in the same scene, he can also show you his concern for others, especially when he's the one at fault. Meanwhile, in New York, the NBA draft is taking place as we catch up with Jerry West and Dr. Buzz, who's pressing to keep more eyes on the NBA games on national television, as we get a glimpse of ESPN being one of their suitors. I like how the show just continues to remind us and show us how much of a businessman Dr. Buzz was and how integral he was to spreading the success of the NBA across the world. But after not making the NBA Finals last season, we see Coach Red is preparing to take his team back to the promised land, and he drafts in the first round, 3rd overall pick, future Hall of Famer Kevin McHale, and traded for the rebound-grabbing defensive stopper Robert Parrish. Now paired with Larry Bird, this is the best front court in the NBA. See, Coach Red reminds Dr. Bus that luck played a very big role in their victory last season, and that they shouldn't be too greedy and let this be enough. Their back and forth to me is so great, and I'm so excited to see this play out this season. Their hatred throughout the season is going to be one of the highlights for me. Catching up with the Lakers coaching staff, what a difference a year makes, as we see Coach Westhead has a new change to his outfits and his style, going completely Hollywood, as he points out to Coach Reilly that they're champs now and they have to look the part. But we see Coach Reilly is mainly focused on his plan to be prepared to be taken down by the lead, as he has new plays, new schemes, but Coach Westhead believes that their jobs are to take charge as leaders of the team as coaches and to maintain order in the locker room. The question is, did success get to Coach Westhead's head? Literally and figuratively, Westhead did indeed go for a new hairstyle. In fact, he claims in his memoir that it was him that first rocked that slick back look that Pat Riley would later make famous. Now, he also went for a new look offense, armed with his $1 million new contract from Dr. Bus. The humble-rooted Westhead saw himself as a genius and came into the first full season as the head coach determined to prove it. Now, he reinvented this very offensive way of playing the game just a few months prior to the actual season in reality. Amongst the players, this was a controversial move, as we'll talk a little bit about later, because why fix what isn't broken? Now, I really love when the show plays in the comedic side of the story, as we see Magic believes that the captain, Kareem, his best days are past him based on last season's performance, and maybe it's time for him to give the team over to the young guys, but the rest of the team is still very much afraid of Captain Kareem. We even learned that Cooper mentions that he sometimes dressed in the shower to avoid Cap, as we see Magic Johnson can't muster up the courage to share his idea with the captain till a little bit later in this episode. Back with Dr. Bus, he continues to put his money where his mouth is, as he's wanting to get ahead of the free agency, and he wants to pay his players more to keep them on the team, and to him, that commitment will be returned tenfold on the court, as we see Jeannie continues to push more entertainment to the forum. This is a perfect example and one of many reasons why players like Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant love Dr. Buzz, because he paid his players to keep them around and kept them happy to play for the Lakers. You might be wondering at home, did Buzz really dish out all that cash? Well, as you all can see on the screen now, he did raise all of the salaries of his key players throughout his tenure in the 80s of them winning those championships. So again, he did put his money where his mouth was. As we cut to Dr. Buss wanting to not only build a dynasty with the Lakers, but also build his trust with his kids, and he wants them to live under one roof as a family. I've been a Lakers fan for over 20 years, and I know all about the family drama with those kids, and last season was just the tip of the iceberg, and this episode really showed the tension between Dr. Buss and those kids. Now, we don't spend a ton of time with Cookie in this episode, but we do see that she still has Magic on her mind as she's trying to move on from Magic with this guy from church, and later, Magic tries to get her back in his life. As we cut to training camp day 1, now we see that Cap's ankle is still an issue, but going into this camp, his stamina isn't where it needs to be as the coaches are ready to wrap this up because of this, but young, energetic Magic Johnson and the rest of the team still wants to practice, which we can see is creating a little bit of tension within the team. But Cap ain't ready to roll over yet, and he doesn't want to get outshined by these youngsters as he wants to prove he's not wiped as he runs with the B squad to prove that he still got it. I mentioned in my breakdown last season, this Cap versus Magic is definitely giving me some Kobe and Shaq vibes, and I'm here for it because I love this rivalry and I love this competition between the two. Now, this was easily one of my favorite scenes of this premiere episode. Seeing these two alphas going head to head is what I love about sports. It should be this competitive. When you have two of some of the greatest players to ever play this game on the same team, they should push each other, but also show the team this is how you stay on top. Now, as a lifelong Kobe Bryant fan, I remember him talking about why he loved practice so much because he actually went at practice like it was an actual game compared to the NBA now. And not to sound like an old head, but we hear stories all the time about current NBA players skipping practice or having days off during the game. And I know the game's different now, but it was just a different era during this time where players went at each other to prove their worth. We see things get a little bit too competitive as unfortunately Cap gets his retina scratched and the practice is called off. You may be wondering at home, was there really tension between Magic Johnson and Kareem? Well, according to numerous sources, including the memoirs of both Magic Johnson, Kareem, and Coach Westhead, Magic came into the camp determined to make the team his. After winning the 1980 NBA Finals and clinching the championship with his historic performance in Game 6 when Kareem was out, Magic asserted more control right from the start of training camp. This led to a power crash between him and the captain. For his part, Kareem was not fully recovered from the injury. Coach Westhead describes him as showing up to camp in poor shape and opening the door for Magic's attempt to take over the team as a leader. Meanwhile, Dr. Buss plans to invest in his players, doesn't make Jerry West too happy, but he has to deal with it. But his ex-wife isn't on board with him wanting the kids to move in with him because he's so unreliable and she wants him to set them free. So how does Dr. Buss decide to fix his situation with his family? Well, he does what he knows best, which is use money for the answer as he mixes business with pleasure and gives his kids franchises, tennis, horses, and a country band as investments, and he makes some waves to making the money flow properly. Man, this is the father of the year. This was definitely an Oprah moment. You get a team, you get a team. As Jerry West, in reality, he did indeed gift his children with sports franchises. But a little bit more context to that. In reality, Jeannie took the stewardship of the LA Strings in 1981. Johnny began to helm the Lasers in 1982. And Jimmy really wanted to be a jockey and at 6'4" attempted to be the tallest jockey in history and was given the control of the family thoroughbreds. The new season kicks off. The Lakers are on a roll, but it's important to remember that the Cap isn't playing as he's recovering from his eye injury. Off court, we see Magic Johnson learns that guilt, it gets easier when you live with it. As we see that Magic Johnson is sleeping with his legal advisor, who's married by the way, as we see that he's still not prepared to have those papers sent to Melissa Mitchell. As Kareem is preparing to make his return to the team, he's also preparing to become a father for the first time to his baby boy Amir, which means someone with the right to rule, which is the complete opposite of how he felt about Magic's approach to taking over the team. Finally see Magic tell Cap how he thinks the offense should be ran after starting the season off so well without him, and to Magic's surprise, the Cap agrees. Now he agrees because bringing his son into this world has really changed his perspective on this situation and has opened up his mind to partnership and sacrifice. I really enjoyed this scene between the two because it makes you think as an audience member, if you're not too familiar with the story, will Magic Johnson be willing to sacrifice and make this partnership work? More importantly, will he work to take responsibility and claim his kid and put someone else first? It's important to point out the coincidence that both Kareem and Magic both became fathers in the same year. They are very competitive, but also speaks to where they are at this point in their lives. One of them had a child with his wife, while the other most likely had a one-night stand. Get a little bit more context with Amir, which was Kareem's first child, who was born November 18th, 1980. According to his memoir, Giant Steps, Kareem saw Amir's birth as a chance to reorder his personal and professional priorities. Indeed, in 1981, he publicly considered leaving the Lakers and moving to New York City to live closer to his roots. Back to the hoops, it's time to lace up as Magic is in the zone and only sees himself on the floor and is dominating the game until he hurts his knee and is required to have surgery, and he'll be out for about 12 plus weeks. Now, we see the team is struggling without having Magic Johnson on the court. Meanwhile, Magic is resting up, but doesn't stop him from balling off the court, if you know what I mean, and have to keep up his stamina while still having sex. But he has this heart-to-heart conversation with his knee as it reminds him that things may not be okay, and he might ever be the same after this injury. In reality, how bad did Magic Johnson hurt his knee? It was pretty bad. November 18th, 1980, in the in-game between the Lakers and the Kansas City Kings, which was approximately 7 minutes until halftime, Magic Johnson heard a quick snap in his knee and suddenly drops to the ground. 6 days later, he had to have surgery to remove the meniscus cartilage in his knee. Now, there was a real fear that this injury might be career-ending. Now, in his memoir, Magic Johnson described this injury as being miserable, and he was terrified that he might not ever play again. With Magic out and the captain coming back, Coach wants to use this new game plan, which he coins as the system, which focuses on ball movement and precision. The ball must never touch the ground, and he wants these players to sprint to their spots. Now, back home, Magic Johnson's legal team presents their offer to the Mitchell family, but Mr. Mitchell wants Magic to take responsibility to be the father, as does the Johnson family. Now, the truth about Andre Johnson, all the details of the private encounter between the Johnson and the Mitchell family have been fictionalized for this episode. There was actual tension between the families due to the pregnancy. In reality, Magic Johnson was in Los Angeles when Andre was delivered. He flew back to meet the newborn child the next day. Speaking of fathers, Dr. Buss questions his sons and wonders, where's their killer instinct? During a family game night of Monopoly, while it's all fun and game for the boys, Dr. Buss sees them not having that ability to take out their opposition. Even if they're family, they clearly don't have that same instinct as Dr. Buss. Which, not to jump too far ahead in reality, but when the boys are called to take over the team later down the road, any Laker fan like myself will tell you that those boys almost ruined the franchise. For many years, they were making terrible decisions, but more importantly, they didn't have that killer instinct. As we wrap up the episode, we see Mrs. Johnson meets with Cookie to help her son get out of the situation he found himself in, which admittedly felt like this was definitely a made-up TV drama situation versus what probably happened in reality, because I don't see Mrs. Johnson going to Cookie and not having the respect and putting that pressure on her to help her son get out of the situation. I kind of feel like that particular moment of the episode was definitely fictionalized, and honestly kind of felt like it came out of left field. Now, I also felt that we should have spent more scenes showing Magic Johnson struggling with this almost career-ending injury and exploring those 12 weeks of him being out of the game, but also showing Cookie maybe trying to move on from him a little bit more further. So I wish there was more scenes focusing on those two particular storylines. We see them having the conversation on the phone as he wants to figure out a way to get her back in her life, but she tells him he has to figure it out before she gives him another shot. We cut to Magic Johnson meeting his son Andre. We see that the Lakers' new system is starting to work and they go on a 7-game winning streak without Magic Johnson, who is scheduled to come back before the NBA playoffs. And we get another highlighted moment for me as we see Mr. Johnson fires Magic manager with some pretty interesting Samuel Jackson phrasing as Magic recuperates with his family. In the episode with Magic entering the arena and the crowd's going crazy, happy to see their young star making it back on the court soon, But after seeing all this hype going on, we cut to Larry Bird, who hits a shot to shut up the crowd, and he lets Magic Johnson know that he's here to stay and he ain't going nowhere, as we open the episode with the Boston Celtics versus the Lakers, and we end with Boston letting the Lakers know they're here to play ball. Season 2, Episode 2, titled The Magic is Back, as the team is struggling to find their rhythm with the return of their star point guard Magic Johnson. Meanwhile, Dr. Buss looks to rekindle his own magic with an old flame. The big question is, how did the team feel about their star player Magic Johnson returning? Well, some players weren't that happy, as we can see in this first scene, but Magic Johnson couldn't be happier to making his return. Speaking of happy, every time Jerry West is on screen, I get a big smile on my face, as he simply puts it, it's basketball, not rocket science. As we see the Lakers practicing for the first time with their star back on the court, things aren't the same for Magic. He's not in a good offensive rhythm, he's not used to the system, and things just aren't the same. But that's issues on the court. Off the court, we see in the locker room with the jokes and the banter where normally he's able to jump right in, but he's even a step behind with the guys in the locker room. So the magic is definitely missing on the court as well as off the court. Now, we're a month out of the playoffs, and Coach Westhead has to make a decision. Will he stick to this new system that he created, or will he revert back to their old ways so that their star point guard can get right back into rhythm? Now, as a sports fan, you see this happening all the times where teams and their key players end up getting injured and they have to come back. And it's tough, especially if the team was clicking while they were gone, which in that case, this episode really highlights how a star player being gone for a long time and having to be implemented back can really rock the boat. And I thought that this episode captured that perfectly. Now, in reality, you might be asking, was Magic and the team really this out of sync? Well, according to Magic Johnson's 1983 memoir, he struggled both physically and emotionally on his return. He describes feeling like an odd man out of the situation with his fellow teammates, discovering that the guys had new inside jokes. Now, for their part, the Lakers talked enthusiastically to the press about Magic's return, but behind closed doors, frustration really grew. Pat Reilly and Magic both described the situation in their memoirs. In various accounts, as the contemporary reports, Magic teammates admit to resenting the oversized emphasis on both the press and the front office on Magic Johnson's big return. We saw in this episode, Norm was especially frustrated. With Magic being sidelined, he had an all-star caliber season, racking in a league high in assists. Now, he would have to move aside to share the ball handling duties, and this made the situation very uneasy on the court as well as off the court. Now, cut back to Jerry West coming to the coaches with a player who could not just win them one championship, but the next 5, and that is David Thompson, aka Skywalker. As Michael Jordan described himself as the whole meaning of virtual leap began with David Thompson. Now, David Thompson was introduced in the Hall of Fame in 1996, and this high jumping highlight reel is one of only 8 players to score 70 points or more in a single NBA game. Even Hall of Famer Bill Walton described Thompson as Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Tracy McGrady, and LeBron James all rolled up into one. So yeah, if you're Jerry West and this guy was available to join this team, you have to look at this lineup of Magic, Thompson, and Kareem. Yeah, that's a scary team. But it comes with a cost, and that involved them trading their reliable point guard Norm Nixon, who again at that time was playing like an all-star where Magic was sidelined. As we see, Coach Reilly stands with West on making this trade, but Coach Westhead doesn't want to rock the boat because he has these guys gelling so well at this time. The question I have for you all in the comments is, if you're familiar with that Lakers team during that time, would you have made that trade? Personally, I think I would have pulled the trigger, but let me know your thoughts in the comments section. But also, taking a note on all these decisions being made in this episode, particularly by Coach Westhead, we see that Coach Reilly wasn't always in agreement with that, but he always stood by his side regardless. We'll be talking about that a little bit further in this breakdown. Meanwhile, while all that was kind of going on, we see Dr. Buzz shares his dreams with Claire about his honey being on his mind, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We see the Lakers getting ready for the next game, and the media is all in the frenzy because Magic is making his return, as they question him on how the Lakers feel about him making his return and what adjustments they have to make. As we see him answering the questions with a smile on his face, but you'll notice his teammates are a little bit uncomfortable with the situation because in all honesty, it's unnecessary attention and it's a distraction from taking away from the game and then winning the games of basketball. As we see the slogan "Magic is back" is being worn by fans, even though Magic appeared to not want this to be seen, it was a little bit too late. Now, after 45 games, he's officially making his comeback, as coach wants him to think of one word when he's on the court, and that's suave, meaning easy. He wants him to take it easy, having no pressure, but will Magic Johnson listen? I want to backtrack a bit because in reality, yes, the hype was real during this time. The Lakers sold Magic Johnson's big return in a very major way because they had to. Despite a winning record in Magic's absence, the team's ticket sales were down. Only 2 of the 22 home games sold out while he was injured. So indeed, Dr. Buss was intending to capitalize on his star's grand return. He even changed the date to make sure that he returned at the Forum. As part of the Magic is Back campaign, Magic was welcomed to the team by a sold-out crowd and this over-the-top fanfare, including the t-shirts that we saw in this episode. Back on the court as the Lakers take control in the first quarter, which is coming to a close. Still no Magic on the court, but we see Coach Reilly talking to Coach Westhead that he's made his point as we see him substituting Magic in for Norm. Now, you can clearly see that Coach Westhead was not comfortable with his decision, but he did it anyway. As Magic is excited to get back to playing ball, unfortunately, his very first play is a turnover. Now, while these events did happen, a little bit of it was true, but a lot of it was actually made up for dramatic purposes for the show. For example, in reality, it was said that Coach Westhead was actually seen holding back tears when he saw Magic making his return, and even Kareem joined the standing ovation when we saw Magic hitting the court. So a lot of love was being shown in reality for Magic Johnson's return. Magic was extremely rusty when he made his return, and Magic Johnson did throw the inbound pass off of a Nets player's head, and he also made some other turnovers. He missed his first couple shots, but in the second period, he actually scored 9 points and started to drive on the floor, started going to the paint, and he actually went 4 for 12 in that actual game. Now, the episode didn't show this, but in the fourth quarter, Magic made some big plays down the stretch. He assisted Norm on making a 15-footer to close out the game, and the Lakers won 107-103, and Magic's final stat line was he had 12 points and 11 rebounds in only 24 minutes. So it wasn't a bad game as this episode made it out to be, but I know why the show did that. But back to the show, as all of the media pressure only wants to focus on the bad things during this win, as they point out the lack of chemistry on court, which is now getting into Magic Johnson's head. Now, I absolutely love the conversation between Pat Riley and Magic because this is a great example showing how Pat was really able to connect to these players because he was a player at one point as well, so he can understand what they were going through. As we see the discussion about not acting like Magic, but actually being Magic, but more importantly in this scene, he knows that Magic Johnson's knee was 100%, but he promised to keep this a secret. Man, I'm telling y'all, as a fan of basketball and sports in general, you hear this all the time, how athletes coming back from a major injury, they are not just concerned about getting back in the rhythm and getting back into the flow of things, but the most important thing is they have to find their confidence. That's the hardest part about coming back from an injury. So I thought that this scene in this episode in general did such a great job of showcasing that. Going back to just the reality of the situation, did Magic really suffer from this kind of identity crisis of his confidence? Well, back in 1992 when Magic Johnson released his other memoir, he surely did have some issues. In this memoir, he describes the physical aspect of being very difficult, not only getting back in shape, but it was the mental of it all, losing his confidence in his own body, as he recalls being afraid to play aggressively as he did before the injury because he was afraid he was going to re-injure himself. As we cut to seeing Coach Reilly in the gym with Magic Johnson as he's rebuilding his confidence, and in reality, this actually did happen. Coach Reilly became his sensei in this situation. In 1983, Magic Johnson talked about how Pat Riley helped him get back into form. They were doing drills, exercises during practice. According to Magic, Riley pushed him to the breaking point. Magic said that Riley volunteered to help him finish his rehabilitation on his injured knee. They would go into practice as if it was the real games. They were doing sprints, defensive sliding drills, rebounding. 45 minutes after practice, they were working to get Magic back into basketball shape, but also rebuilding his confidence. I love these type of stories about these two legends. Now back with the Buss family and his kids, we see that Jeannie continues to show that she's the closest thing to her father, more so than the boys, as she's pushing to have one of their key tennis players being back in the game versus her focusing on her dating life, which was actually she was dating Johnny at the time. As we see that her plot, Jeannie dealing with the whole identity crisis of who she is. Is she someone outside the shadow of her father? Which, speaking of her father, we see that he's going on his dinner date with one of his old flames by the name of Honey, and he asks her to stick around. I'm gonna be honest with you all, the whole Dr. Buss and his Honey situation and Jeannie and her plot, it didn't really jive well with this episode. Speaking of like Magic Johnson and the team trying to get back into rhythm, the flow of those scenes to me just kind of didn't fit as well as the other stuff. Now, I understand they're setting up stuff and subplots for these characters, but compared to everything going on with the Magic and going on with the team and the injury and the trading, all that stuff to me was just so intriguing. But this subplot, Jeannie and Dr. Buss and Honey, just didn't fit well to me personally. But let me know how you all felt about all that. It wasn't the most, but every time we would cut to them, I felt the momentum kind of slowed down compared to the other stuff in this episode. Which, speaking of that spicy stuff that I enjoy, we got some trading rumors going on with Nixon telling a journalist who is definitely instigating the situation, telling him he heard about the rumors of David Thompson. As we see, Norm definitely does a big no-no, which is a team rule in a lot of sports, is keep things in the locker room, but he unfortunately tells this reporter that Magic Johnson will be forgotten about in 15 years. Now, in reality, did Norm really talk this type of stuff to the press? Well, he certainly did. He did say that in 15 years that Magic Johnson will be forgotten about. Although in this episode, that was a fictional journalist that didn't really live in reality, Norman did say on record to a journalist that exact quote. Now, Norm is known to giving off-the-records commentary to reporters. Oftentimes, he shared his frustration with him and Magic and other teammates, but this time, Norm took it way too far. The published article sparked a media feud between Magic and Norm, which we know the press loves to eat that stuff up. Now back to the show, we see the trade deadline is closer and Coach Westhead went to the Nuggets game to scout Skywalker, but he has concerns about how he might fit into the system, but he also fears that him and Pat might lose their system that they just created because they have to adapt to Magic's return. Now, we see Pat Reilly briefly mentions the previous coach of the Lakers, which was Jack McKinney, and how he felt like Jack wouldn't allow his ego from stopping him to making his trade. But Westhead still isn't 100% comfortable with making this move, so he asks Pat Reilly a very simple question, and that is, will Magic Johnson's knee hold up? Which Pat tells him that it will, and Westhead goes ahead and makes this trade happen at first. This is a huge moment because we know as an audience, Pat Reilly clearly lied. He knows that Magic knee isn't 100%, and Westhead really did rely on his trust, which comes into a little bit later in this episode, which we'll talk about. But I will mention, do talk about Jack McKinney briefly in this episode, once in this scene, a little bit later on the plane. I do personally wish that there was a little bit more depth with that conversation because we know Coach Westhead probably felt a certain way, like he was competing against Jack after replacing him. So I wish that the show would have spent a little bit more time on his insecurities about replacing Jack McKinney in this particular episode. We get a quick scene, but a very important one nonetheless, as Magic and Pat are practicing, but Magic still isn't 100% ready, but Pat reminds him that he's always ready, especially when it counts the most. He says that Magic is one of those guys that when you need that big shot in the fourth quarter when things are on the line, you want Magic to hold the ball in his hands and to take that final shot, which is very important for a little bit later in this episode. As Wes is just about to make his move and make the trade happen, he lets it slip out in front of Coach Westhead that Magic is excited for the move, which unfortunately upsets Coach Westhead because it's that moment. It's that fear that he had that Magic was running the team, but also his position as a coach is being undermined by this whole situation. He pulls a move that surprises Jerry West as he vetoes the trade because he doesn't want the team to think that Magic Johnson has that type of power over people's position on the team and that roster during that time. time, as we get a very heated battle of a word exchange between Wes and Westhead, and we see that Jerry West gets very personal in this exchange, but Coach Westhead stands his ground and he demands that they kill this deal and that he promises to take the team all the way. Man, this is the stuff I love about this show. Yes, I love seeing the basketball scenes of the Showtime Lakers when they're on the court because it is truly magical. But at the same time, I love seeing these behind the scenes type of moments. It's so intriguing, it's so entertaining, but more importantly, the acting is so believable in these type of scenes. Now, just in case you all were wondering, did the Lakers really think about trading their point guard Nixon? Well, they certainly did. The Lakers front office was keen to trading Nixon to the high-flying profile player David Thompson, and the full story is even wilder than this show actually portrayed. In his autobiography, Westhead outlines his opposition to this trade. Though West wanted to trade Nixon for Thompson to give the team the best guard tandem in the NBA, Westhead felt that Norm was essential to the flow of his new system. He also liked Norm because it went against Magic's rising ego. As a result, he put a halt on the trade and insisted on investigating further. According to Westhead, he did fly out to Seattle and bought a ticket to see the Nuggets play the Supersonics, and he was in disguise to see this star in action. Meanwhile, with his front office and head coach at odds, Dr. Buzz did indeed talk to Magic about this and got some advice from him, and he sure enough, Magic was all in for the trade, telling Buzz that he thought the trade would actually benefit the team. When Westhead learned of this, he vetoed the deal, but not without fallout. As we wrap up the episode with the first round of the 1981 NBA playoffs, as we have the NBA defending champs Lakers going against the underdog Houston Rockets coming off a very subpar season, this should be a breeze for the Lakers, right? But unfortunately, we see the Lakers lose their first game in a shocking loss, 111-107. We cut to game 2 with tensions at an all-time high, and we see the team is falling apart at halftime as Cooper and Kareem have to step in to make Norm and Magic apologize to each other and take it a step further and hug each other as things seem to work as they win game 2 111-106. Coach Westhead learned some very important news as they fly back to Los Angeles, as that same reporter that was instigating with Norm is doing the same thing as he's stirring the pot, as he tells Westhead that it was a great move to allow Pat to work with Magic on practice with his whole knee situation. He brings up the trade rumors as we see Coach Westhead didn't know anything about this. As this trust in his assistant coach and his pal Pat Reilly is now in question, we see that Coach Westhead pulls Pat aside and they have a very heated conversation, which is unfortunately overheard by the team. And not only are the coaches at odds now the players are starting to be at each other's throat again, which leads us into game 3, fourth quarter, 15 seconds left, and the Lakers are down 87-86. As Coach Westhead calls a timeout and lays out the plan, and the plan is Magic get the ball, give it to Cap, or give it to the other options, which none of those options included Magic because he doesn't want him to play hero ball. Until Pat goes to Magic and tells him, like he told him in the gym, he's that guy, he needs to take the shot. As we see, the seconds are ticking away, the options appear to be open, but unfortunately, Magic takes that advice from Pat Reilly and takes matters into his own hand, and he shoots a shot, but unfortunately, it's an air ball, and the Lakers' hope to repeat as a champion is now over. Now, what actually happened in the game? So in reality, Magic Johnson did airball in the final seconds of the game, which did cause the Lakers to lose in a certain extent, right? You don't always blame a player for one play, but that did happen in reality. But the thing that I thought was so interesting when you parallel what happened in reality, just that last year, Magic Johnson was the hero. He won that game when they played the 76ers, paralleling that to after having an injury and now coming up short. That's such an interesting about the psychology of a player of being a hero one year and being the one that they blame for losing them the game and not having them go back to the championship. So really interesting stuff going on there with Magic Johnson. And I wish that show would have maybe put a more emphasis on maybe cutting back and forth from him winning the game versus the Sixers to him potentially losing the game versus the Rockets in this first round. But just to give you guys a little bit more context of the actual game, Magic did have a pretty poor game in reality. He shot like 2 for 14, missing foul shots. He missed some 2 key free throws with 30 seconds left. So it was, in reality, a very bad game for Magic Johnson. So the big question this episode ends with is, what happens now with the Lakers just coming off a championship and getting eliminated in the first round to a very underwhelming Houston Rockets team, who did, by the way, have Moses Malone, so they weren't like completely washed up, but they were way less superior than the Lakers during that time. So what will Dr. Buss do? Will Coach Westhead come back as coach? Season 2, talking episode 3, which was titled Second Coming. As we see the early and tragic start of Larry Bird's career, Magic becomes a Laker for life, and Paul and Pat don't have much trust left in one another. The 1981 NBA season ends with the Boston Celtics being crowned their 14th championship in their franchise history, as Buss and Magic watch what they believe was their championship being held by their enemies, as Red and Bird blow smoke in the Lakers' faces. Now, splitting this up to the 4 main plots that we have in this episode, starting off with what's going on with the Buss family, we see Jeannie prepares for her family game night and find out that she was running late and she's already been replaced by not only her brothers, including their girlfriends, but their father has Honey over as well. As Jeannie is playing third wheel in this family game night, she's trying to get the attention of her father by discussing business, but Dr. Buss doesn't want to talk business during this game night, which I found to be odd considering what he said during the last game night in last week's episode. Now, being ignored isn't new for Jeannie, neither is her father prioritizing his relationship with women over her, but I feel as though she figured that now that she has this franchise, maybe he would be more considerate to hearing her out more and paying more attention to her passions, but also notice how much she wants to impress him and acknowledge her successes. But we see that clearly isn't the case so far, as Buss seems to be keeping his promise with being serious in this relationship with Honey, as he surprises her with his private room being filled with romance. We see Honey whispers to him as they're dancing not to hurt her. Now we cut to seeing Johnny being pissed at his sister for trading his girlfriend, and he brings up that she'll never be his favorite son. Now, as I mentioned in last week's breakdown, the kid subplot in this relationship with Dr. Buss and Honey, it just isn't working for me at all. Right now, it seems to be setting up that Jeannie's either going to be leaving her family business behind if her successes keep getting undervalued, or she's just going to keep pushing forward and becoming more like her father, regarding business comes first and personal relationships come last. Speaking of relationships, Honey and Dr. Buss most likely won't work out, and it probably won't last much longer, especially when this new NBA season kicks off, because Buss wanting to find her seemed to be so odd to me, and right now it seems to be playing that it was more of a distraction from keeping him from missing his mother, but also a distraction from keeping his thoughts away from the Lakers losing, especially in that first round in the NBA playoffs. Now, I believe once they get the new season starting off and they start winning, he's going to probably have either a new woman walking into his life, or he's going to really try to focus on winning another championship, which in return would mean that his relationship with Honey would no longer be the case. Make sure to share your thoughts in the comments of how you feel about the Buss family with the kids in this relationship in the comments below. Now, switching gears and talking about the tension between the coaches, Paul and Pat Reilly, we head into the offices where Buss wants to know what happened with the team last season led by Coach Westhead. As Westhead believes he needs more authority, not having others influencing the team decisions, which is the complete opposite of what Jerry West believes, which is he needs less authority in his position. But what does assistant coach Pat Reilly think, and in particular, does he believe that Paul still has the respect of his players? And we see, as Pat has been doing for most of not only this season but last season, Pat responds saying that Paul does have the trust of his players in that locker room, which we know as an audience that isn't the case. But yet again, I want to point out this is yet another example of how this is a complicated relationship between Paul and Pat, which is a prominent theme in this particular episode of showing how these relationships are extremely complex. But we see Dr. Buss ask the players what went wrong last season, starting off with Norm, who, as we expected, he blames Magic. He says that it was his fault that the last play was how they lost the series to the Rockets, for his example, showing that Magic's ego caused them to lose the game. Now, just a quick side note, I personally am not one of those people that believe that a single player can cost a team to lose an entire game, because there's many more minutes in the game. There's other quarters that couldn't played out differently. But yes, I do believe that a player can make a bad play or make a bad calls that can cause a play to go wrong in that possession. But again, I don't think a single player should be responsible for losing a game for a NBA team, football team, soccer team, you name it. But that's just me. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. But we see Magic extension is being brought up to Dr. Buzz, which catches him off guard considering that he already committed to Magic Johnson with his 5-year deal. Which any smart athlete would do this because, yes, they want all the accomplishments, they want the high stats, they want the championships to prove their worth. At the end of the day, their legacy has to be important to them, but more importantly is having that financial guarantee for not only their future, but their family. In reality, how pissed was Dr. Buss about losing in the playoffs? Well, in his memoir, Coach Westhead says that Buss was extremely upset, not just because they lost to the Rockets in the first round, but then you couple that with the Boston Celtics winning their championship in the 1980s. Now, licking his wounds, Dr. Buss was determined to not waste another season. He met with his basketball trust heads to find out how they could win again. As Westhead says, they have to win big next year or else. Coach Westhead continues to say in his memoir that he described going on a vacation one summer and he got a late night call from Dr. Buss, and Dr. Buss was adamant that the team needed to not only win in the coming season, but they have to do it in an exciting way. But also, winning another championship mean that they got to take away the crown from the Boston Celtics. Now back with Coach Westhead, he wants to make a move that he believes will help the team. That move would be acquiring Mitch Kupchak, who had 4 previous great productive seasons with Washington, and he was a part of the NBA championship in 1978. We see at this meeting where Paul shares this news, we see that Jerry West disapproves of this decision, especially after failing to bring in Thompson. But more importantly in this scene, we see the carryover from last week's confrontation between Coach Reilly and Coach Westhead continues, as Paul didn't even remember to invite Pat to this very important meeting. Now, I don't think he forgot. I think that was very intentional on Paul Westhead's point. As we see, Paul also shares that he brought in his friend Mike, who's not only going to be scouting players, which by the way is Jerry West's job, but also Paul reveals that he's going to hire Mike as his second assistant coach, and he just leaves the room without any questions being asked. I'm sorry, but Paul, in my opinion, was just doing way too much right now. But I do want to point out how Jason Segel is playing this role really well, in my opinion. While we see him making these what he believes is good decisions, he feels bad doing this. You can see that he doesn't really feel comfortable having this type of power in his hands, and it's all in the facial expressions, but as well as it just doesn't come natural to him. So I just love the way Jason Segel is playing this role. Again, you can see he does not feel comfortable not only making these decisions, but he also doesn't feel comfortable of his relationship with Pat Riley at this moment. As Pat confronts Paul, who says that he wants someone loyal, who he can trust, and he tells Pat that they're good, but as an audience, we know that their loyalty is on rocky ice, especially after that plane ride before they lost to the Houston Rockets in Game 3. As Westhead gets the green light to go ahead and make that move for Mitch Kupchak, it comes at a loss as they have to trade their front court player Jim, who's extremely pissed about the decision, not just because he likes playing for the Lakers, but also he mentions that this is going to affect his family because they recently just bought a new house. Now, I completely understand where Jim's coming from and his perspective of the situation, but unfortunately, this is a perfect example of showing that ugly side of sports, which is, at the end of the day, it is a business. But again, Paul made the decision without Pat's approval, as Paul wants Pat to get in line and there will be no more side talks, there will be no more side practices, and no more crossing boundaries as the assistant coach again. Pat pushes back and reminds Paul who stood by him throughout his mistakes, and he respected him even though he didn't deserve it, as Pat Riley walks out of the room. And these performances are so good between Jason and Adrien. They're so believable, and it's kind of tragic to see this, right? Because if you go back to last season, we saw just how close they became, especially after Jack McKinney's injury, and to win the championship and see them having their trust with each other, to now comparing it to how upsetting it is to see them losing the trust, losing that brotherhood. And again, the performances just gives it all away. Again, the performances between these two coaches are phenomenal. Now, to get into what actually happened at the trade of Jim. Now, Jim was very very popular with the Lakers, and he was very instrumental of them winning that championship in their 1980 run. But when Westhead became convinced that free agent power forward Mitch Kupchak was the answer to their prayers, he was happy to throw Jim into this deal and make it happen. Now, Jerry West thought that this deal was ridiculous because Mitch was asking for $800,000 a year, and Dr. Bus was kind of on the fence about this deal until Coach West had convinced him that Mitch was their missing piece to helping them win another championship. Now, did Westhead really edge out Reilly with a new assistant coach? Well, Reilly's perspective on the situation was a bit unknown, but Westhead did bring in a second assistant coach during that season. This new assistant coach did help scout pro and college players. With this new assistant, Westhead believed that he could have the needed intel to navigate West's effort to control the roster. Now, the friction between Coach Westhead and Coach Reilly, while it was kind of dramatized for the show, this was drawn by various accounts that the bond between those two men was breaking up, and their close brotherhood was kind of shattering apart. And we saw the turn kind of take place in the season, as many players were called during that time. Reilly never badmouthed Westhead publicly. Behind closed doors, he expressed doubts of Westhead's leadership, as well as confusion over the wisdom of the office system they had, that he felt as though it didn't really play into the Lakers' strengths. Meanwhile, Coach Westhead began to believe that Pat Reilly was becoming too big for his role as an assistant, as Magic Johnson describes that the mounting tension between the two men in his memoir. The two men stopped eating meals together due to their mounting stress. Pat Reilly began chain smoking. Now let's shine a spotlight on Larry Legend, who's starting off in 1974, French Lick, Indiana, with a population of less than 2,100 people, the home of Larry Legend. As he pays a visit to his father, who couldn't be happier for his college boy, but unfortunately, Larry has recently dropped out of school because he feel like he was meant to be there. He didn't feel right. He was honestly just homesick, but his dad reminds him of what staying home looks like, but Larry, he ain't going back. A cut to February 3rd, 1975, Larry Bird learns that his father, Joe Bird, who at the time was 48, unfortunately takes his own life. Fast forward to 1976. We're introduced to Bill Hodges, Indiana University assistant coach, is scouting Bird, who reminds him how rare of an opportunity he has, and he's wasting this opportunity as he convinces Bird to come back for at least one practice. And during this practice, we see why he goes by the name of Larry Legend, as Bird comes into this practice with jeans. Yes, that's right. Regular, outside, normal people wearing jeans, and he shows exactly why he is a legend, as he is just busting ass in his practice, which we end up cutting to 1979. We see that Red plays a visit to Bird, who hasn't committed to the Celtics, and it's been over a year now, and he just wants to win one more college game, and particularly win that championship game, because he lost to Magic Johnson. We wrap up Larry Bird's plot in this episode in 1981, where we see he's back home after winning that championship, and he goes into his father's barnyard and he looks at all the newspapers his father had kept over the years with all of Larry Bird's accomplishments, and he ends up coming across one of those newspaper readings which showed Magic Johnson beating him in college, which is just fuel to that fire, fuel to one of the greatest rivalries in sports history. Now, shining a light and breaking down the reality of Larry Bird, did he really drop out of college? Well, yes, that was a very true story. He did drop out of the state of Indiana, just didn't feel comfortable. His first year was very rocky. Larry was recruited out of high school by legendary coach Bobby Knight to Indiana University, but shortly into his freshman season, the Hoosiers, Bird ended up dropping out. Now, focusing on the legend born of tragedy, Larry describes his father, Joe Bird, as his best friend, a man who loved his son. He was encouraging to him to be strong and independent, but Joe was a tragic figure in his own right. It was documented that Joe Bird definitely had some issues financially. After Joe and Larry's mother divorced, it was said that he fell into a really bad depression. On one occasion, Larry Bird recalls that his father told him and his other kids that he wasn't planning on staying around much longer. Now, to answer the question, did Larry Bird really dominate his college team in jeans? Well, they don't call him Larry Legend for nothing. As is recalled by the Indianapolis Monthly, this is how it went down. After Bird left IU, Bill Hodges, the assistant coach at Indiana State, continuously tried to recruit him to come to play for his school. When Larry finally came up, he did pull up in blue jeans. Hodges did offer him some shorts and sneakers. Larry Bird declined, and he ended up just busting everyone's ass on that court. Wrapping things up and closing out with Magic Johnson, who, after losing to the Houston Rockets, Magic is at a camp where he is having his toughest critics, which are kids, reminding him that Larry would have made the play to win the game, and these kids ain't taking it easy on him, as we end up finding out that this is just Magic Johnson in his own head. He's suffering with some self-doubt that he has going on, but also he's got his extension on his mind after Bus surprised players like Cooper with giving him 10 times his pay from his last contract. I don't know if I missed this, but we see that Magic Johnson and Cookie are on speaking terms. Now, the reason I say I don't know if I missed this because last time we saw them talk, it almost seemed as though they weren't going to be talking for a while. So I don't know if we missed the scene or if it's just assuming that they've always are going to be in communication, even if they have a falling out of a sorts, as we'll talk about here in a second. But we see that she brings up the level of commitment that he has for the Lakers, and she doesn't feel like it's being reciprocated to him. As I mentioned last week, I feel as though we've been missing these scenes with Dr. Bus and Magic Johnson, and we finally get that in this episode. As like I mentioned earlier, Dr. Bus is committed to making sure that his Lakers can continue to win and beat the Celtics in particularly, but he also wants to be committed to a star player in Magic Johnson. As Magic and Bus finally share a scene together for the first time really this season, Magic talks about their contract. They have an honest moment between each other as Bus wants his commitment to be a leader in the locker room, but he also wants him to be a Laker for life. And we see Dr. Bus offers him $25 million to be a committed Laker for his life. Now, obviously, Magic is over the moon as he calls Cookie about this deal, of the terms of the deal, and we see them having a little bit of back and forth, having a disagreement here as Magic tells her, if you're not committed to the Lakers, I don't need you in their life. So right now, we see that they're not on speaking terms, at least for the time being. If you guys know Magic and Cookie's relationship, she will be back in the picture sooner rather than later, as we have one of my favorite scenes of this episode being displayed, as we see Bus invites Norm over to his house, and oh yeah, Magic Johnson is there as well, as Bus wants to get back on the winning terms, but he poses the question and he's pressing Norm about what happened last season, but in particularly, why did you say that to the media? And he wants Norm to let everything out of his chest. Now we see Norm is being pressed, and he tells Dr. Bus while Magic is in the room, kind of walking around him back and forth. He says he loves playing for LA. He loves playing for the Lakers, and everything between him and Magic is all good. And listen, man, I love this scene because this was a straight up shakedown. This was a mafia move. This felt like I was watching Goodfellas. I love this scene, but low key, if this was me, if I was Norm, I would have been asking for a trade or to be released because that is just uncalled for. Now, again, this is a business, but I feel like they just handled that so unprofessionally, if you ask me. But what's going on in this episode, and particularly speaking on the contract, 25 years for $25 million. This was actually true. This was an offer that was given to Magic in 1981. Bus offered Magic Johnson that lifetime contract of that 25 for 25. And at the time, this was the longest and most lucrative deal in history of sports. Now, since no player had ever played longer than 25 years in their professional level, this deal clearly extended well beyond Magic's playing days, as they highlighted in this episode, thus guaranteeing him a future job with the Lakers in some capacity. While this deal seemed very lucrative for Magic, a lot of people did point out that he was only getting paid $1 million per year, which obviously at Magic's caliber, he was very underpaid. But at the end of the day, Magic understood this contract because it was a display of loyalty, and that's really all he really wanted, was that loyalty, not just being a key Laker player, being a franchise player, but he wanted that commitment from the owner, which was Dr. Bus. So even though it was a little bit cheap, he loved having that lifetime guarantee with the Los Angeles Lakers. But again, it is a business, so indeed within a few years, Magic realized he was being underpaid and renegotiated the financial terms with Dr. Buss. And as he described in his 1983 memoir, in the summer of 1981, he offered me what was then the longest and most lucrative contract in sports history, 25 for 25. Obviously, this deal would be extended upon my playing days, as Jerry explained that he wanted me to be in good income and he wanted me to retire as a Laker. He also wanted to guarantee me to have a job after I played and continue to be in the organization with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, describing the pick fair scene, yes, this actually did happen. Buss took both men to Vegas for a weekend for a boys trip. Details are true to Magic's own account. Dr. Buss had arranged this really big brunch, but didn't waste time on any small talk. He looked directly at Norm and began grilling him. Was he still able to play with Magic? Did he think Magic attracted too much press and too much fan attention? Did he need the ball too much, etc.? Because if any of this was a problem to Norm, Buss would be happy to trade him elsewhere. Norm told Buss how much he loved LA, he loved playing with the Lakers, and that he wanted to stay. Second season, talking about episode 4 titled The New World. As the start of the Lakers season starts off rocky, we see Coach Westhead wants everyone to buy into this system, but he also wants full control of the team. Meanwhile, all Magic Johnson wants to do is to find a new team. 1981 season begins. We see after winning the championship last season that Larry Bird is gracing the Sports Illustrated magazine and not Magic Johnson. But hey, right now, the Lakers are whooping on the Celtics, leading at halftime 73-45, but don't let that score fool y'all. Number one, it's the preseason. All the teams are trying to get their players in shape, they're trying to get their plays implemented, but also none of the starting five for the Boston Celtics is playing a second in this game. So don't let the score fool you. But speaking of fools, don't let Paul tell you differently, because he don't care. He loves this league because his system is working good in his eyes, but also to add more happiness to his fuel of fire, he couldn't be happier right now because he is reading the spread of the magazine, which is covering his system that the Lakers will be running this season. But this scene to me is a perfect example of the differences between the coaching style with Paul Westhead and Pat Reilly. Paul, he's great at the numbers, right? He's an analytical thinker, which can work for some teams. But you have Pat Reilly, who looks at the more intangible things of a players. As the scene is pointing out, we saw that Paul was about to cut Kurt Rambis. Now, Kurt Rambis wasn't a Hall of Fame player by any means, but if you are a true Lakers fan like myself, anyone would tell you he was a hard-nosed player, willing to do the dirty work, and even though he didn't have all the greatest numbers in the world, he was a key member of the Showtime Lakers, and he was also very popular with the fans. So this is just another example of how, yes, Paul did certain things right, but he didn't see the things that didn't matter sometimes on the stat sheet that makes a player special. Cutting over to what the players are going on during this time, they're not fully bought into the system and they're not really believing in their head coach. Cut to Red and Buss exchanging words about Magic's $25 million for 25 years deal. Red knew about this because he was actually head of the committee at that time, but after Buss jokingly says to Red how badly the Lakers were whooping on the Celtics during that game, we see Red took the competition to another level as he tells the coach of the Celtics to let Larry Bird play in this game, but then he really shakes things up by spilling the beans to the media on the deal that wasn't supposed to be public. Remember, last week, Buss told Magic that he wouldn't let the details of his extension go out there because he wanted to keep the morale of the team going good. But hell, all that is about to change. As the headline reads, Lifetime Lakers, biggest deal in sports. So now that the cat is out of the bag, tensions are high in the locker room over Magic's new deal, and even the Cap has some words to the media as Kareem tells the media that he doesn't feel too confident on his spot of the team and he feels like there's people being chosen over each other and this doesn't feel like a family unit as it used to be, and he even mentions that he's thinking about maybe leaving the Lakers and joining the New York Knicks, and that's possibly on the table as this information spreads to Buss and the management and it has all of them going in a frenzy. Buss calls for a late night meeting with the management and coach. He learned that Kareem is kind of dodging Buss right now as he's rescheduling meetings with Dr. Buss, but we see Paul Westhead takes this chance to stand up and he believes he has to be the one to talk to Kareem and to bring the Cap back in, let him know he's head honcho, and more importantly, he has to hear this from his head coach. Bill and Jerry West are obviously not a fan of this idea, but they leave this meeting because Paul wants to have a one-on-one with Dr. Buss, and Paul lays his cards out on the table. He lets Buss know that Magic, he's been acting up in training camp, and he's been resisting the system, but more importantly, I can't believe Paul said this to Buss. He tells Dr. Buss that he has these type of emotions, he's running this type of way, he's moving in this type of manner because he has a direct line to the king. Now, Buss reminds Paul that he's been very accommodating for all of his demands, and he thinks that this drama right now is just a speed bump, as Paul tells him that he will bring another championship back to LA, and Buss, well, he tells him he better bring that championship back or else his job is on the line, and he needs to remember who is the king. Meanwhile, this isn't the only drama going on with Dr. Buss, as there's competition going on under his own roof between Jeannie and his girlfriend, or soon-to-be fiance, Honey, because Jeannie right now feels that Honey's taken away the attention from her father. We'll get more into details on that a little bit later, but if you all have been watching my breakdowns the last few weeks, this particular plot with Honey, Dr. Buss, Jeannie, and the boys is the weakest element of the show so far, and I'll get into more details of why I feel that way. But going back into the player drama in the locker room, where Magic Johnson's contract is brought up yet again, and this time is by Norm, who mentions that he's practically Magic Johnson's like a half owner of the team, but Magic brings up a very legit point. If this deal was given to any of those players in the locker room, they would have taken it. And I 100% agree with Magic at this point. But Norm, he doesn't stop the conversation there. Look, I can understand both sides of the argument, but honestly, very shocked by how Norm was handling this conversation, especially after that Mafia shakedown last week. Norm, where was this energy when you were in the room with Magic and Dr. Buss last week? But hey, it's a week later. He's with his boys this time around. He's not solo 2 against 1. So let me know what you all thought about Norm and his approach. And do you side more with where Norm was coming from, or do you take Magic's side in regards to if that deal was offered to any of those players, they would have taken it? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comment section. Add more fuel to that fire. Coach Westhead walks in and lets everyone know that he's been empowered to run this team, and the system will be used at all times. And if anyone is defiant, well, they'll be sitting on the bench next to him. And as he says those words, he looks directly at Magic Johnson. So he'll be taking tallies at home. That, to me, not a good move by Coach Westhead, because you're singling out a player in front of your entire unit. That was a bad, unprofessional move in my opinion. But hey, we got some examples for Magic later that he didn't handle things properly, but right now I gotta say that was very unprofessional by the coach at that moment. Fast forward to it is a Halloween opening night to start the season, and they have to play the same team that eliminated them in the playoffs last year with the Houston Rockets, and surprise, surprise, they end up beating the Lakers again by 1 point, 113 to 112. We see the Lakers lose their very next game to the Nets, which, by the way, should be blowout victories for the Lakers right now, especially with the team that they have on their roster. But right now, things are broken. Magic hates the system as he's calling Cookie, trying to figure out what he should do in his current situation with not only his coach, but also all the drama with his teammates surrounding his contract. Meanwhile, Coach Westhead seems to want to break this team from the inside, as he's having this conversation with Kareem about him losing his job if he doesn't get things up and going, which to me is another example of a completely unprofessional move. I'm not saying players can't have relationships with their coach or have like these type of conversations where they're maybe disapproving of moves from management, but to talking about losing your job, and then to add more to that, he brings up the fact that Cap's been treated wrongly by management and the team, and that if he left to go to the Knicks, he wouldn't be mad at that because of how the team's been undervaluing him. I'm sorry, guys, but what is wrong with Coach Westhead? Again, I know this is probably fictionalized and dramatized for the show, but sticking to the context of the show, that is so unprofessional to have that conversation with your star player about you potentially losing your job if you don't win games, but also, hey, if you leave, I understand where you're coming from. No, that is not how you handle that. Again, you can be honest with your players with certain subjects, but I think this is just offline. But right now, to me, it looks like Coach Westhead is a mole working for the Celtics. But let me know what you all thought of that conversation. As we see, the Lakers are just a roller coaster of a team right now, where they'll win a game and they have confidence, and then lose a game, win a game, lose a game. While all that was going on, Magic isn't feeling like Magic anymore. He feels like he's not able to be himself. As we see right now, the start of the season, 6 games in, the Lakers have a disappointing record of 2-4. This is where things get a little bit rocky, as after they lose to the San Antonio Spurs by almost 20 plus points, we see a brief conversation between Kareem and Magic where Kareem is giving Magic some humble pie to let him know, put your ego aside. The same thing you told me last season, you need to apply that to what's going on with you right now. As Paul has another public argument with Pat Reilly in front of the players on the bus, as he's mentioning how Magic, he isn't running this team, and Magic walks on the bus as he says this, and he walks away from the team as Paul tells Cooper to go get Magic to return to the bus, and if he doesn't do that, Cooper's going to be walking home and taking a cab. What in the world was Westhead drinking, y'all? Like, number one, just from a dangerous perspective, how are you going to tell your star point guard, Magic Johnson, and your starting shooting guard to go get a cab if they don't listen to your orders? Like, I'm sorry, y'all. Westhead is losing his goddamn mind right now. Like, because number one, they don't have like private bodyguards to protect them, to taking a cab in the middle of the night in San Antonio. Coach Westhead, he's losing right now in my eyes. But again, we're going to have some examples of how Magic did some wrong things in this episode as we cut to Jerry West and Bill talking to Dr. Buss and letting him know that Paul, he's out of control, and more importantly, he's lost control of his team, as they suggest to Dr. Buss that maybe a coaching change should come about. Now, obviously, Dr. Buss doesn't want to hear anything about that, especially after what happened with Jack McKinney a couple seasons ago. And we see Buss believes that he's a winner and he's not willing to pull the plug quite yet. And to make matters worse, we cut to seeing Pat Reilly having a neck injury due to all the stress of Paul not listening to any of his ideas, as Pat Reilly flat out tells Paul that if they keep losing at this rate, they're both going to get fired. And we see Paul responds, he doesn't care. Well, hell, I could have told him that. You could see that he clearly doesn't care by the way he's been handling himself, not only in this episode, but based on things and early on in this new season, as Paul knows he's got luck on his side. He's gotten this opportunity after what happened with Jack, after all the drama going on, but he still managed to win a championship. And he's not willing to go down this way, but more importantly, he's willing to go down with this sinking ship no matter what. Again, Paul Westhead's ego in this episode, and the way you see Jason Segel playing the character, I talked about it last week, where he has this type of mannerisms, he has this charisma where you just want to smack and choke the hell out of Coach Westhead. But there's still this level of like, you kind of understand where Westhead's coming from, the way Jerry West and Bill kind of undermine him about coaching decisions, player decisions, contract decisions, the way the players kind of ignore him. You can see where he's coming from, but the way Paul is handling this is just completely wrong. But again, Jason Segel, the performance, as well as bringing in the Pat Reilly of it all, how Adrien Brody plays into this, they're doing an excellent job. But all of a sudden, the Lakers find a 3-game winning streak, and we see the coach is out partying in the club. He tells the media that the system is working perfectly, but then he goes ahead and says that you can plug any player into this roster and the system will work. Obviously, that isn't something that Magic Johnson wants to hear, as he tries to set up this meeting, and he does set up the meeting with his partner in Dr. Buss, and Magic is just trying to express himself and let us know that things just aren't working well. Even though we're winning right now, the system won't work for how he plays, and more importantly, it doesn't flow well with how the Lakers play basketball. We see Dr. Buss, he says he pays Magic to play basketball, and he pays Paul to be the coach, and he doesn't tell any of them how to handle that. So I like where Dr. Buss is coming from, because it is a situation where you guys are grown-ass men. You need to figure this out. I don't need to step in and be the mediator. I'm just the owner of the team. I'm not the therapist of the team. So I understand where Dr. Buss was coming from. But out of nowhere, we cut to seeing Buss telling Jeannie that he's ready to tie the knot with Honey. She disapproves of this, and just to kind of nip this in the bud, I've been saying this last few weeks, and I don't want to be like a sourpuss because I love the show so much. But this plot is like a boring halftime show. Like all the stuff with the Lakers drama, the contracts, the beef between the coaches, the beef between the coaches, and obviously the players. That stuff to me is the Showtime of this show. But whenever we cut to the Buss drama, it just slows down the momentum. And right now, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Again, I don't want to keep dragging this plot down because, number one, the performances are great. I understand where the show is trying to show this perspective of, look, Everything right now in Dr. Bus, sports-wise, he's trying to figure things out, but it's not working out. But in his personal life, things are working out. Look at the genie of it all, right? She was successful. Season 1, they win a championship. She has great ideas. Her dad's listening to her. The family's starting to come together, and all of a sudden this woman comes in. So I get narratively what they're trying to do. I just don't think it flows as well, and it's not as interesting as the other plots. Let me know what you all think about all of that. Cut to having a meeting between two coaches. We finally get the return of Jack McKinney, who reminds little Paul where he came from as they're having lunch about their matchup with the Pacers versus the Lakers coming up soon. But we see Jack tells Paul while he's proud of Paul for what he's doing, not necessarily how he's embracing his system and how the Lakers have been playing with his offensive plays, but more importantly, he's happy for Paul about how he's embraced the Hollywood lifestyle, because he could never do that. All he thought about was basketball. But all this kind words won't stop him from exposing Paul and showing that his system doesn't work in the upcoming game. I'm not going to lie, I miss Jack McKinney. I really enjoyed this kind of scene because, again, it shows the more vulnerable side that even though his ego in this episode was at a highest level possible, he still has respect for Jack McKinney, and I really just enjoyed their chemistry on screen. As we cut to the actual game, Lakers versus the Pacers, as we see Pat Reilly pulling Magic Johnson to the side, and he just wants to know, why isn't Magic buying into the system? I really enjoyed this quick scene. I honestly love the scenes between Magic and Pat Reilly. The question at hand is, will Magic put his heart into the system before he completely throws in the towel? We'll talk about that here in a second, but let's cut to the actual game as the players are all saying hi to Jack, and Paul's face says it all. He's jealous right now, and I understand why, because obviously a current coach doesn't want his current players to be all happy to see their old coach, but this doesn't stop the game from being a nail-biting, down-to-the-wire, back-and-forth game as we cut to double overtime with the Lakers up by 1 with very few seconds remaining. See, Paul makes a bad call for Magic to make a double team, which almost cost him the game, but they end up managing to win the game, and we see that Paul is kind of embracing this win, not only because they won the game and the winning streak continues and he thinks his system is working, but more importantly, he beat Jack McKinney. Now, as we wrap up the episode with the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Utah Jazz, and we also have Magic Johnson versus Coach Westhead, we see that there was a discommunication on the defensive end, which has Paul blaming Magic Johnson, causing them to have this scuffle going on. He doesn't want to join the huddle during a timeout, as we see the Utah fans, which, by the way, if you are an NBA fan, you know that Boston Celtics fans are pretty bad, and they really laid into the players, and there's a lot of racism that goes into that. But speaking of racism, Utah Jazz is very known to coming at different players, black players, as we see the crowd coming at Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson comes at them, gives them the finger. Westhead, stick up for your players, stick up for your team. He kind of buys into the Utah Jazz, kind of leaning into them coming at him, telling Magic to leave those people alone. Like, come on, Westhead, can you stand up for Magic once in this episode? But we see that this beef between them just gets worse. Westhead threatens to have Magic go into the locker room if he doesn't join the huddle. We see that Magic slowly starts to walk towards the locker room, but then he starts to have all this recalling of all the negative press that's going to come of this, all the stuff going on off the court, on the court. So he does eventually join the team. They end up winning that game by literally like 1 or 2 points. But despite the win, we see this issue has to be addressed immediately, as we see them talking and having a word in the closet, and we see Paul just lays it into Magic Johnson. If I don't want you to play, you won't play. If I want you to play, you will play. And we just see Magic takes it in. He doesn't really come at, and I respect Magic Johnson for this. Again, Westhead ego is crazy. The media is outside waiting for a word from them. Magic goes to the locker room. Meanwhile, Paul talks to the media and he tells them this very interesting quote. He assures them that the almond tree bears its fruit in silence. I love the way Jason Segel played that scene because it's just comedic genius. But speaking of silence, silence isn't on the menu for Magic Johnson, as he tells the press that he's not having fun, he's not happy with his position on the team, and he will talk to Dr. Buss, but then he ends by telling the media that he's going to talk to Dr. Buss about what he can do because he wants to be traded. Second season, talking episode 5, titled The Hamburger Hamlet, we see the aftermath of Magic Johnson's trade request, and we get a brand new chapter to the Lakers franchise, beginning with a new leader at the helm, and it is the start of Showtime. So who's it gonna be? Coach Westhead or Magic Johnson? As we open the episode with Dr. Buss getting bombarded with those questions from the media, as we cut to earlier that day where the Lakers are leaving the Utah area after playing the Jazz, as Norm brings up the situation of Pat Reilly, asking him who's going to stay, the coach or the player, because right now the team just ain't big enough for the both of them. And speaking of the coach, Paul is legit living on planet Westhead right now, as Pat is trying to warn him he should get ahead of this. He should be talking to management, trying to get his side of the story to them, but Paul assures Pat that Buss will either publicly punish Magic Johnson or just give him what he wants. Either way, he believes that they've won, and also that this is going to blow over in just a couple days. Now we see Paul is talking to the media. He's cool, calm, and collective, but he takes this opportunity to throw his star player under the bus, as he tells the media that Magic Johnson was embarrassed, and more importantly, that his star player has more growing up to do, which is to be true. He is only 20 years old. This is only his third year in the league. I get where he's coming from, but this isn't the thing you say to the media right now. You have to appear to be looking collected, not throwing each other under the bus. And speaking of bus, the fact that Paul thinks that Dr. Buss will be trading his #1 draft pick, who, by the way, was a big reason they won Game 7 to win that championship a couple years ago. And also, he did win the Finals MVP. He just gave him the biggest contract in sports history. So again, the confidence and the ego on Paul Westhead is insane. But I love the humble pie that he gets in these next few scenes as he hears this emergency meetings going on that Dr. Buss has called, and clearly this is his first time hearing about this, but a very interesting moment here. And throughout this episode, by the way, we have Kareem saving his coach, talking to the media, and also as they're walking to the bus, you'll notice Kareem tells the team that they appreciate their coach, that they are really thankful of their coach. As we have Magic Johnson walking on the bus, he has a quick stare down with his coach, and he looks at the camera and tells us he meant what he said. But just backtracking a little bit, again, addressing that Kareem of it all, not only in this scene, but throughout this episode, Kareem really did like Paul Westhead. And right now, as it stands, it appears that the team is standing behind the coach versus Magic Johnson. Cut to seeing Dr. Buss is pissed because he feels Magic Johnson stabbed him in the back with this recent trade request after giving him all that money for that new contract. Of course, we see Jerry West is pretty much in the camp that he told Dr. West about this, about how he felt that Westhead just wasn't the right coach for this team and that his time has run up. But Buss is still standing on that he's not going to be trading Magic Johnson, #1, but he's also not going to be firing his head coach. But he does want to talk to Magic and talk some sense into him. Before we get into these big meetings, we have this family meeting between Westhead and his wife and his daughter as he meets them at what I assume to be the Hamburger Hamlet, which is the title of this episode. He tells his family, just like he told the media, that everything's good, everything's gonna blow over. But his daughter, she knows what's going on right now. She tells him that Magic Johnson has way more importance in the team than her father does. And then she proceeds to just flat out tell her dad, "Dad, you're gonna get fired." And you notice from this scene on, this is where Paul, that whole planet that he was on, that ego that's just bigger than the world, it's deflating. You start to see Paul is starting to realize he's seeing the writing on the wall that, yes, like his daughter said, he's about to get fired. A cut to him going to the offices and trying to talk to Dr. Buss, which we see Dr. Buss' assistant tells him that he's not seeing anyone right now, meeting with someone, and she doesn't tell him who it is. Paul, again, is starting to get the hint as he's walking towards the other coaches and sees a board filled with other names for coaches to replace him. Again, reality is starting to set in for Paul Westhead. And before we move on, I just need to know if there's anyone watching this right now, did anyone feel bad for Paul Westhead? I just need to know. No right or wrong answers. For me personally, I don't feel bad at all. But hey, let me know if you were starting to feel bad for what's going to happen to Paul right now. But we have a meeting, or I should say a secret meeting going on with Magic and Buss as Magic comes in the back door. He lets it all on the line. He tells Dr. Buss that he feels that this whole partnership situation was just an act. and more importantly, he's his silent partner. I gotta point out right now, the confidence on the actor Quincy Isaiah playing Magic Johnson in this scene, and he's been great this entire show, but this scene was just flawless in my opinion. We have this back and forth between two characters, with Bus bringing up Magic's father in the situation, and which was completely unprofessional in my opinion. But Magic doesn't back down. He throws in how Dr. Bus has his family drama and he's sleeping around with all these women. Just the tension in this scene was just so well put together. I love the dynamic between these two actors. It's just so electric and so believable. As Bus throws at him that he just made his 20-year-old one of the richest people in sports, and he treated him like a son. Again, Magic ain't hearing it. He speaks facts right now because he tells Dr. Bus the truth. Money he got, he deserved it, because he's not only the future of this franchise, he's clearly the best player on the current team. Again, the way Isaiah was playing into this scene just was so great. But before Magic walks out, Magic looks at Dr. Bus and tells him why he didn't do anything when he approached him in last week's episode. Bus, he has no words. But as Magic walks out, he tells him, I bet you hear me now. I'm telling y'all, that boy, he ate that scene up, y'all. Give a round of applause to Quincy Isaiah. He just was phenomenal in this scene. We cut to seeing Westhead catching Magic as he was walking out. And instead of maybe taking this moment to be the bigger guy and maybe just say, I'm sorry how this all played out. No, Paul Westhead instead gives him one of his BS Westhead special words of encouragement. He tells Magic that there's lessons in life that can be learned. But then he goes on to tell him no matter what happens, that he still believes in Magic. I don't know how Magic didn't, and again, I know this is a TV show and it was fictionalized, but I was surprised that the show didn't take it to a level 1,000 and have Magic either laugh in his face or just pop him upside the head, especially when Magic gives him the response like, oh really? I love it so much. But see the actual meeting taking place between Dr. Bus and Paul Westhead, as we see Paul immediately is suggesting that this should just be given a couple days, it's gonna blow over, and Dr. Bus immediately tells him, after just talking to Magic and honestly being humbled and kind of sunned by Magic, he tells him that they're going to be letting Coach Westhead go. Now Paul, he tries to scramble around, comes up with different reasons why this isn't the right move. Of all the reasons, the first thing he starts to bring up is yet again, Magic isn't the right player for this team. He shouldn't be leading this team. If you let him win, he's going to be running this franchise to the ground, blah, blah, blah. Paul, focus on yourself, my man. I couldn't believe that he just continued to throw Magic under the bus. But speaking of Bus reminds him that he lost in the first round after winning that championship, which, speaking of this championship, Paul brings it up that I won you all a championship. But again, Bus doesn't break. As we have Paul kind of losing himself for a second, but he collects himself. He's a professional at this moment. He shakes the hand of the man that gave him this opportunity. And before Paul walks out of the office, he has one question for Dr. Bus. Who's it gonna be? Before we move on to who Dr. Bus picks, let's have a little sidebar. Now, for my sports fans, but in particularly my basketball fans, whether that's Los Angeles Lakers, Chicago Bulls, San Antonio Spurs, Boston Celtics, or more recently, the Golden State Warriors, what I'm getting at is when you have a successful NBA franchise that wins enough titles to be deemed a dynasty, where do you all stand on this position of the importance of that dynasty is all stems on a successful head coach with a great system that works for the team, whether that be Phil Jackson, Red, Pat Reilly, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, just to name a few, versus obviously having a great team first. You have to have a great team. But you also have to have a great franchise player, whether that is a Magic Johnson, a Kareem, a Berg, or Michael, a Kobe, a Shaq, a Pippen, a LeBron, you name it. Where do you all personally stand on the value? What do you value more as a fan? Having that successful genius head coach with a great system that works for the team, or having that star once in a generational type A player? Where do you all stand? Now, to throw my hat in the ring, and I'll just use Phil Jackson for example. Obviously, Michael Jordan, greatest player of all time for some people. Y'all know how I feel. Kobe Bryant's the GOAT, rest in peace. But Michael was killing, right? But he wasn't able to get over the hump with a great coach in Doug Collins. But then you have Phil Jackson that comes to the mix, and he's able to tap into the team in a different way than Doug Collins. And obviously, we know the history of what the Bulls Bulls were able to do. Same thing with more recently with the Golden State Warriors. They had a great up-and-coming coach with Mark Jackson, but he just wasn't able to tap into the team the same way that Steve Kerr was able to do. And obviously we know the history with the Warriors. So I personally believe a dynasty is really, yes, you must have a great coach and a great system, but you also have to have those great players. And I think the players, I value having a personal, great, once-in-a-lifetime type of player over having a system. And I'll just use this before I wrap up. Think of Greg Popovich, who is considered to be one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport. You look at his franchise players, whether it's David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard. You notice when his last big franchise player left the team in Kawhi Leonard, Spurs haven't been to the playoffs since he left. So again, that just points to my position that I think the players are just a little bit more valuable to a dynasty. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below. But as I digress, getting back into the discussion here, see, the first person that comes to mind for Dr. Buss is the one and only Jerry West. As Dr. Buss believes that all signs point towards West being the new coach, and he even has Bill on his side, and he gets on his knees, he's begging, and he even throws in as a Hail Mary, do you really want the Boston Celtics to win another championship? So the question is, will Jerry West take the job? Because like Buss says, the Lakers need him right now. But cutting over to my man Pat Reilly, who this is his big moment, as we get a brief flashback of young Pat watching his dad, who got fired after thinking that he was going to be able to move up in his career. That was a moment that stuck with Pat throughout his life as he's talking to Paul Westhead. Right now, Pat's under the assumption that he's about to get fired. He's about to meet with the management in a little bit, but we have a really nice scene here between Pat and Paul as we see Paul is apologizing for all the bad mistakes that he made, and he didn't really value the advice that Pat Reilly was giving him. They have a bit of a laugh, and we see Pat is just a stand-up guy right now because he could just be, you got me fired, F you, screw you, this, that, and the third. But instead, Pat Reilly shakes his man's hand and he goes an extra step further and he thanks him for giving him that shot. Again, it's a small, short scene, but I really did appreciate their brotherhood that they had between season 1 and also in season 2. They had their ups, but they also had their downs. But I really enjoyed that scene, and it just kind of encapsulates their friendship that they built over these last few seasons with winning the championship, but also getting booted out of the first round. Let me tell y'all something right now. The genius, and I mean genius shot that we have. Pat is feeling like he's about to lose his job. He's about to miss his opportunity. We see that he slicks his hair back with some water as we start to get the classic look of Pat Reilly, and that was 100% foreshadowing to what's about to happen later in this episode. I love this little scene here. As he's ready to think he's about to get canned, only for Bill and West to grab him to go see Dr. Buss, as Pat is being told that what's about to happen is going to happen in front of the press and he doesn't want to get embarrassed, only to learn that it's his time to be the coach. But is he going to be the head coach full time, or is it just a temporary position? As ladies and gentlemen, this actually happened. We go to the press conference where we see Dr. Buss announces that he's fired Paul Westhead. Then he gets crazy here. He's just winging it at this point. He announces that Jerry West will be the offensive coach and Pat Reilly will stay on as a coach, but not the actual coach. And rightfully so, the questions start to come in from the media because right now this is a crazy situation. Like I had mentioned, Dr. Buss is just going on a whim right now as the media is asking him who's going to pick the lineup, who's going to pick the plays, who are we going to talk to at the end of the games, as Dr. Buss looks at them and says, you know what, those are some great questions. Let me go ahead and have Jerry West answer those. This scene to me was not only hilarious, but it was just so chaotic, and I just loved every second. This is, to me, my favorite scene of this episode because it just goes to show you, and again, this happened in reality, and it just speaks to the idea of great players, great coaches, synergy, having their moment to shine. The fact that they went through all this craziness and still managed to become the Showtime Lakers and the dynasty they built is just a brilliant scene, and I love it so much. But Jerry West right now, he's having some PTSD as he's recalling all the times that he was the head coach for the Lakers between 1976 and 1979. And by the way, his record was respectively won 145 games, but he also lost 101 games, but he did make the playoffs from all 3 seasons that he coached, and even one of the years, I believe it was the 1977, they made it to the Western Conference Finals that year. So he had some success, but at the end of the day, Jerry West didn't want to be a head coach. As Wes is on the mic, he makes it very clear to the media that he will be working for Pat Reilly and that Pat Reilly will be the man in charge as the man of the hour steps up to the mic. And I love the shot where he's looking at Paul from the distance. We see Pat brings up how crazy of a day this has been, but he also, again, another example of him being a stand-up guy, he mentions that he lost a friend, right? We know that Paul West had lost his job, and then he drops a bar on the media. Sometimes it takes a left hook to get you going, and he believes that that left hook landed. I love that line. The hair is even mentioned in the press conference. This scene was just executed perfectly. I have no notes. I have no cons. It's just a perfect chain of events, in my opinion, and it was just executed with perfection. But the big question at hand is, what does this all mean for Magic? As we cut to the next day, Wes will support Pat on the bench. If he needs him, he'll give him some advice. But other than that, Pat Reilly is a coach. And we cut to just literally seconds later, we see Jerry West yelling at the players, giving the players some wisdom, some advice. I love Jerry West so much in the show. Jason Clarke is just so great in the role. But I appreciate the small details and the great acting. Will admit, as far as like a little criticism, I do wish the show would have took a little moment to maybe have one or two scenes showing Paul going back home to his family and just having these moments of reflection and kind of missing the moments that he messed up on and the mistakes that led to this moment. Or maybe having Pat Reilly going home, telling his wife the good news, or showing just a brief shot of maybe Magic Johnson watching this shit show on television with his press conference and maybe him having a smile on his face and really capturing what just went down. I just wish that they would have had a little moment at the press conference. But again, just little nitpick there. But we see Coach Reilly puts a smile on Magic's face after he tells them that they're going to put the system aside. That's no more. It's time to play freely. Wing it. Have fun, as this is the start of the Showtime Lakers. But the crowd, unfortunately, isn't on board right now because they still got some hate for Magic. They're booing him when they're on the court, but that didn't stop the Lakers from beating the Spurs 136-116. As we get this brief montage of all the various different fans sharing their opinion on Magic Johnson, how they feel like he's a spoiled player, they should never let that coach go. And I also love the line when a lady says that, oh yeah, Magic's got some magic all right. His magic trick is he makes coaches disappear. I thought that was such a funny and hilarious line. But right now, Los Angeles are hating the Lakers as Dr. Buss gets into this brief argument with Honey as his name is being brought up in the paper by the legendary 14-time Sports Writer of the Year, 12 of them winning consecutively. Jim Murray calls him a disgrace. As we see, Dr. Buss apologizes for raising his voice at Honey, and they have a little bit of an emotional scene. I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to sound like a broken record at this point, but I just wish that that moment would have been more impactful and had more of an emotional punch, because to me it just kind of felt flat. And it's not that they don't have chemistry, it's just, as I've mentioned in previous reviews, the relationship right now and the Dr. Buss drama just isn't my favorite plot going on. But let's put that aside and get to some drama here with some of the key players and the owner of the team, as there's a couple date night out as we see Kareem is salty about Buss firing his coach. And it took me a moment to really kind of realize that yes, there was a relationship built last season as well as this season with Kareem and Paul Westhead. There was enough of a established relationship to kind of understand where Kareem was coming from. You see, Buss takes this opportunity and tries to work his magic. He calls Kareem the father of the team. He wants to make him a very rich player. He wants to give him access to the forum and make more money for him. But Kareem ain't no rookie. Kareem ain't Magic. He doesn't just want money. He doesn't just see the dollar signs. He's a smart, savvy player at this point in his career. And he points out the short-sightedness of Magic taking that deal, as he points out how it's just going to just even out in 5 years. It's not going to be a really great deal. But this is where Kareem doesn't let back. He tells Dr. Buss that the real problem why he didn't re-up because of Dr. Buss's ego, his selfishness. It's tough right now, right? The Lakers just can't catch a win. They fire their coach, they get a new coach, their franchise players happy again, but now their veteran, their OG, and Kareem isn't happy. So again, it just goes to show you it took a lot of magic for the Lakers to become a dynasty. Now we get a brief scene between Honey asking Jeannie to take it easy on her father because all the stuff he has going on with the team. They have like a bit of a moment where it seems that Jeannie kind of understands the situation and she's kind of accepting Honey at this point. Again, I don't want to continue to repeat myself, but every time we cut to the scene, I just think of, oh, it's halftime. Let me go to the bathroom. Let me get something to drink. I just don't care about that plot. But again, it wasn't heavily involved in this episode, so I can't complain too much. But as we get to some more things here, I feel like this is the first time this season that we actually have a scene between Jeannie and Magic Johnson. As we see, Magic is now kind of questioning how he handles the situation with her father, and we see Jeannie tells him that she looks up to him because he stood up to her dad and she appreciates that, and she calls him her hero, and they have a bit of a moment there. And I miss those moments between Jeannie and Magic, because if you all know the real life relationship, they were very close. So I love those little moments between those two characters. The Lakers lose 3 out of their last 4 games, and the decision of firing Paul and replacing him with Pat isn't working. Pat isn't getting the respect from the players. We cut to the scene between the meeting of Dr. Buss and Pat Reilly. Bill wants Buss to make the decision to just cut Pat Reilly, but Dr. Buss is sick of all this stuff. He wants stability and he wants something permanent. He gives a simple question to Pat: do you want to coach his team? And of course, Pat says yes, but unfortunately, they lose their next 2 games. And the losing doesn't stop there, because they lose the next 10 of their next 20 games, and then things are just looking hopeless right now as the players are treating Pat Reilly like a substitute teacher. But Pat, he's had enough, man. He finally speaks up. He hits the drawing board. He's calling out all the players with their flaws and all their bickering and the complaining about other players. He talks about Kareem. He talks about Magic. And if you want to win, you have to be tight and moving forward. If anyone on this team has beef with one another, speak to that person face to face. And then he throws in a little fourth quarter Hail Mary. Oh yeah, Rambus, you'll be in the starting lineup now. This is the moment where Pat Reilly becomes Pat Reilly, but also the Los Angeles Lakers become the Showtime Lakers. We wrap up this episode with the Lakers officially going 57-25 to end the season, the top seed in the Western Conference. And of course, Pat Reilly is now officially the head coach of the Lakers. And also, Magic Johnson is happy right now. As the headlines are reading, will they beat the Boston Celtics? See, Dr. Buss marries Honey, which again will be interesting to see where this plot actually goes. And the hope for the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Boston Celtics doesn't happen, because the 76ers beat the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, meaning that the Sixers will be facing Lakers yet again. And we have this moment which is just so fantastic as the Boston Celtics chants, and as the Los Angeles Lakers, I've heard this chant so many times. And we get a fantastic moment to end this amazing episode as the Lakers look at the camera and they have a message for the Boston fans. Today's video is sponsored by Into the AM. This second season, talking episode 6 titled Beat LA. Now, after winning another NBA title only to lose the very next year, it is a long way back down the mountaintop as the Lakers have to rebuild their team, and in doing so, they lose a key player in the process. Meanwhile, old relationships are rekindled and others are destroyed. It is the 1982 NBA Finals, and the Lakers win against the 76ers 4-2, and it is time to celebrate. Now, despite all the controversy surrounding the team, I'm talking about Paul Westhead being fired and replaced by Pat Reilly, talking about Magic Johnson being paid the highest contract in NBA sports history, and creating some tension on the team while doing so. Regardless of all that controversy, they won, as Magic has a new mindset, which is he wants to stay on top. His goal is continue to win, as we see a picture in his locker with the headline reading, "When will Magic face off against Larry Bird?" Now, I do want to point out, because the episode didn't bring this up, but Magic Johnson did win his second Finals MVP at the age of 23. I really wish they would have pointed that out, because number one, it would have had more credibility for him earning that money from Dr. Buss, but also it would have showed Larry Bird who's really on top. So I wish we would have spent a little bit more time on highlighting that Magic Johnson was the best player on the team during that run. But we fast forward a year ahead, as it is 1983, as the Lakers face off against the 76ers yet again, as they will try to recapture winning their championship back-to-back seasons. In doing so, would be the first team to do that in 14 years. And the last team to do it, well, you guess, was the 1969 Boston Celtics. as Magic team is very confident in beating the 76ers because, hell, they've done it twice already, so they're just confident. They're almost like this is a guaranteed win, but Pat Riley has to remind them, look, the 76ers want blood. They want revenge. They want to show that they deserve to be here and that they can beat the Lakers, taking things too lightly, and they're celebrating already like they won. Well, spoiler alert, as we cut to game one, Moses Malone was not playing any games in this series. He was the MVP of that season, and we all know that he wants to be the best big man in the NBA during that time, and he was giving it to Kareem as the 76ers take both game one and 2 in blowout fashion. The 76ers right now are the bigger, faster, and they are the hungrier team right now as they are beating the Lakers 3-0. As we head into Game 4, the announcers bring up that no team has come back from a 3-0 deficit. After almost sweeping every single round prior to this, the NBA defending champions are swept by the 76ers, who yet again was the team they beat the last 2 title runs. And remember, they were supposed to beat them. At least that's what they thought in their heads. And speaking of the heads, that losing voice is back in Magic's head. But I also want to take the time to point out, because this is probably my biggest criticism with this episode. I know there's only a certain amount of screen time that we can focus on because they're covering so much ground, but I wish they would have focused what went down in that regular season, because it was a good season for the Lakers. They were 58-24. Magic Johnson was leading the league in assists, but this was also a Moses Malone league during this time because he had just won the regular season MVP the year before. He won the MVP that year and in the NBA Finals, so Moses Malone was that dude during that time. But something that I wish they would have definitely shined a light on, the NBA All-Star Game was hosted by the Lakers that year. So I would have loved to have seen maybe 1 or 2 scenes where Dr. Bus prepping the NBA All-Star Game and getting all the hype around it. That's something I wish we would have spent time on. But again, going back to shine the light on the league in general, the 76ers were dominating the NBA, especially the finals run. That playoffs, they were 12-1, which during that time was the highest winning percentage before the Lakers broke that in 2001. And then later, the 2017 Warriors defeated that record. But speaking of defeat, I wish they really would have shined that the Boston Celtics, they were swept that year as well. This was the first time the Celtics had ever been swept in an NBA playoff history. They were swept by the Milwaukee Bucks. I wish they would have maybe shined a little bit of light on that, showing how these two dominant teams, Celtics and Lakers, were swept in the same playoffs. And then last little fun fact for you all, Paul West said he actually coached the Chicago Bulls during that year. As we cut to Dr. Buzz telling Jeannie that Red called this happening, that this wasn't going to last. And I found this next line to be very strange. As we see Jeannie tells him that he can always fall back on real estate. I'm sorry, am I missing something? LA Lakers just won 2 of the last 3 NBA championships, and all of a sudden it's like the end of a dynasty, the end of a run. I think that was a little bit more of a dramatic element of the TV show to kind of show them at the down and outs. Like, I get it. You lose a finals, you probably feel like you got to start from square one, but the reality is you're still one of the best teams in the NBA. So I just thought that was like a very odd thing for Jeannie to say to Dr. Bus during that time. But as I digress, we cut to seeing Red talking to Larry Bird, who was coming off of an injury, about how the Lakers are being over and it's their time to shine. And I love this line by Larry Bird, as he hopes that that isn't the case, because he wants his shot at the Lakers, but more importantly, he wants his shot at Magic Johnson. We cut to this meeting with Dr. Bus and his management, as he's rightfully pissed that the team wasn't able to capture at least one game during that finals loss, as we have the newly appointed GM a year ago, Jerry West, blaming himself for not drafting properly, as he did end up drafting one of the greatest players of all time and a future Hall of Famer in James Worthy, who unfortunately they're blaming the injury of him breaking his leg a couple days before the playoffs as one of the reasons they lost. But he's also upset that he didn't pick MJ. That's right, Michael Jordan. Can I just take a moment to just point this out? How, number one, there's a couple crazy things that went on. The fact that the NBA winning team, the champions, had the #1 draft pick at their disposal, it just goes to show you that the NBA has come a long way, that the winning teams do not have that luxury nowadays. So that is just crazy to me. But also, can you all imagine if the Lakers had drafted MJ over James Worthy? Magic, MJ, Kareem, who's beating that team? But again, if you are an NBA fan like I am, there's a lot of what ifs. What if this player would have got drafted? What if this player would have never got injured? There's a lot of what ifs, but it's just crazy to think Magic, MJ, and Kareem on one team could have been a possibility, but we'll never know unless you play NBA 2K. You can make your own team. But the plan is to make some major changes to the roster, and they don't want to waste another year of their lives. As we learn that Kareem hasn't been picked up as a free agent after 3 months, and no team seems to be really interested in picking him up in the offseason. Right now, the Knicks are his #1 landing spot, but they're not really interested in the cap right now. Agents suggest that maybe it's because of the lack of personality with the media and the fans. To be fair to Kareem, he wasn't he wasn't the face of the NBA during that time, but he did have some clout. He was very famous. Not only was he one of the dominant players in the NBA, but he also was outside of the NBA. He was in films, I think of 1972's Game of Death starring Bruce Lee and Kareem, but he also was in 1980's Airplane. So I don't know what else the media wanted from him. Again, I know he wasn't like the spokesman of the NBA or whatnot, but it just goes to show you that the league is a business. It's not all about what you do on the court. It's also about what you do off the court. Cut to trouble in paradise with the Buzz family as Honey's been out all night and appears to be back to her old crowd of friends, getting high, getting drunk, and back to her old ways as the whole work over family conversation is brought up. And listen, I'm just going to make it brief because you all know how I feel about these type of scenes. I don't know where this is coming from. This kind of feels like it's coming out of left field, this whole kind of animosity in the relationship, because if you just look at this episode narratively speaking, the last time we saw Honey and Buzz, they were at the game holding hands, looking as happy as to be. In the next scene, we see them having this argument. So to me, again, this is a perfect example to me that the Buzz family drama is the least compelling plot for me. And every time we cut to them, it just seems that they're kind of forcing the issue. And we'll talk a little bit more about Honey and what she did to Dr. Buzz a little bit later. But let me know what you all thought about that. Meanwhile, we see Magic still shooting his shot with Cookie. He's trying to get back with her as she is headed to San Diego for a new job opportunity. Seeing one of the many things I love about this show, which is the behind the scenes of how they were able to acquire players, trading players, signing players. We see that Jerry West is up to good stuff, trying to rebuild this roster to get back to the championship. As we have names being thrown out there like Byron Scott, who ended up being a very key player for the Showtime Lakers. They're also mentioning the terrible Donald Sterling, who is the new owner of the San Diego Clippers during the time. The Clippers were trying to be like this bootleg dollar store version of the Lakers, rebuilding their team, but they do have some players that the Lakers are interested in. And if they want to pull the trigger on some of these players, that means they have to trade away one of their key players, and it's right now between Norm and Wilkes. As we see a conversation between Jerry West and Magic Johnson talking about it's time to make a decision and if he's comfortable with the decision, which is trading away a key player in Norm, as he realizes that it takes these type of tough decisions to win more games, to be #1. I'm not gonna lie, I really do wish that we had more moments between Jerry West because he's one of my favorite characters on this show, but I love the back and forth and kind of the understandings between these two characters, Jerry West and Magic. Something I noticed that I wish we did get more scenes between these two great characters. As Norm is living his best life, not knowing what's about to come to him, as he is out dancing, training for Soul Train with legendary actress, dancer, choreographer, singer, songwriter, director, Emmy and Tony winner, and future wife of Mr. Norm, Debbie Allen. See the players watching Norm dancing with Debbie. They feel like he's distracted right now. He should be putting more time on the court to get back to winning. Now, I have a question for you all. As the team questions Norm's commitment with the team, we have this shot of Magic looking at Norm. Now, the question I have, was that a look knowing that Norm was about to be traded and he kind of felt bad about that? Or do you all think that was a look of jealousy, meaning that he wished that he had a woman like Norm has in his life right now? Or do you all think it's a combination of both? What do you think of that look from Magic? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Speaking of Magic, we see he's pulling a magic trick right now as we see a scene with Cookie on her interview, which wasn't going that well. And it's not due to her. It's just because those guys were being kind of racist, from being honest with you all, talking about they're not looking for just one person in an urban area. Have Magic showing up, and out of nowhere, he's talking her up, and the interview's starting to go well. He's doing a good job of just really #1 showing like, oh, she works with Magic and she's in a relationship, so it kind of plays to her hand. If I'm being honest, I thought she was going to be a little bit pissed at Magic during that point, but I'm glad they didn't have like that moment. She just was appreciative of what he just did, because it shows, as we see in the scene, he's showing interest in her dreams and not putting himself first. As he learns that Cookie is single and it's time for Magic to make his best move off the court, as he just wants to get one more chance with her, and she gives it to him, as we see him making an announcement to all the women in the conference that he's no longer a ladies' man. But being honest with you all, I found the relationship between Cookie and Magic to be way more compelling than Dr. Bus and Honey. Number one, I just think they have better chemistry, but also, to be honest, they have more meaningful scenes that makes this type of moment feel like it's earned. Let me know what you all think about that. But we head over to Norm, who's celebrating his birthday, and he learns that he's been traded on his B-Day as he recalls his first time putting on a Lakers jersey, and he never thought it would end. As he heads to his birthday to celebrate with his friends, he says goodbye to his teammates, but he also says goodbye to management. I really kind of like the scene between Norm and Jerry West, who Norm claims that Jerry West was not a fan of him, but he appreciates him being a man and, you know, just at least faking that he's upset that Norm is leaving. As we see, Norm makes a birthday cheer as he tells he promised to bust the Lakers' ass next time he sees them. Fast forward to a perfect segue, we see that ass whooping taking place. As Norm and the Clippers beat the Lakers 110 and 106, we see the media douse the Lakers and their new look team. Speaking of new look, are you all looking for some fresh new gear? Well, look no further. Let's hear a word from the sponsor of today's video, Into the AM. Today's video is sponsored by Into the AM. Into the AM is a clothing company with a variety of amazing products such as t-shirts, hoodies, jackets, shorts and underwear, headwear, and much more. Their t-shirts have unique designs, they're incredibly soft and extremely comfortable, and they're made to last. But the best part is, you can get 10% off by using my discount code MovieFiles when you're selecting your new gear, which you can find that code in the description below. So shout out to the sponsor of today's video, Into the AM. If you all are looking for some fresh new gear, check out the link in the description of this video. And if you all see something you like, use my discount code. You won't be disappointed because they have some really awesome stuff that I personally own. And I want to, again, give a shout out to Into the AM. Back to the breakdown, separating the difference between need versus want. We have a conversation with Pat and his wife, who just sees the team as just being on the defense right now and not on the offense. They've removed their foot from the gas pedal because they've seen the top of the mountaintop, and right now they seem to be very content. As Pat points out how the players have lost their hunger because they needed to win, they wanted to win, and he feels like he's lost some things to say to motivate the team. Now, speaking of need and want, we see Magic makes a very big move off the court, which is asking for the hand of marriage from Cookie. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I really enjoyed that moment because we've seen over the last 2 seasons that this is a relationship that means a lot to both characters, and I am really looking forward to seeing this relationship because there's a lot of highs with Magic and Cookie, but there's also a lot of lows. So I don't think we're gonna focus too much on that in the finale next week, but fingers crossed we get another season to really explore that relationship. As one marriage is about to begin, we see another one about to end. As we have a scene between Honey, who just found out that Dr. Bus was still married to his ex-wife Joanne, who he forgot to file divorce papers. He says he forgot, and he blames it on being busy with the team and trying to make them win a championship. Honey's leaving him. Now, I personally believe that this is probably the last time we're going to see Honey. For those at home that are curious, I don't think Honey's a real character. I think she's fictionalized for the show purposes, because what I was able to find, I believe she's an amalgamation of a couple different women that was in Dr. Bus's real life. Someone went by the name of Veronica, who back in 1972 was allegedly married to Dr. Bus while he was married to Joanne. So I think it's a little bit of her. And then later on, like close to the 80s, he dated a playboy by the name of Debbie. So I think, again, Honey's an amalgamation of those two characters. But I hope this is the last time we see Honey because, again, as I mentioned before, I'm not a fan of that plot of Jeannie, Honey, and Bus, so I'm glad that this is moving forward. I mean, we have one more scene that we'll talk about with her a little bit later, but let me know how you think that relationship ended. Did it work? Did it not work? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. No time for Dr. Bus to cry because he gets a phone call and he finds out some tragic news that Kareem, his cap house, catches on fire. Now, we cut to that scene. We see that he's lost everything in the fire, and he almost lost his family in the process. It seems to be a moment of reflection for Cap as he has to live in the moment and appreciate what he has before it's too late and before it's gone. As we wrap up the episode with seeing Cap wanting and needing to play after he lost everything in the fire, and he gets love from the fans, and he sits down with the team to have a conversation. This conversation, he demands the highest from his teammates, and he wants to play for each other. He wants them to root for each other, but he also wants to give it back to the fans, which is a great callback to earlier in the episode when he had that conversation with his agent. This is his way to giving back to the fans, which is giving them the highest level possible for full commitment to the game, but also winning the game. I thought that was a very excellent moment for Kareem, who, if we're being honest, Kareem had a lot more to do in season 1, and season 2 was definitely more focused on Magic, but I love when we get these moments of reflection, showing who Kareem was and showing that he wanted to win by any means necessary. As the mindset is be the hunter or the hunted, we see Magic is watching Bird, Bird is watching Magic, and we also get a moment where Kareem still has a lot of gas left in the tank as he breaks the record from Wilt, which was the all-time scoring leader of the NBA history, which we all know was a record that was held for over 40 years, which was recently broken by LeBron James. Now, for those just kind of curious about what happened during the regular season before we get into this playoff run, Bird was the season MVP. David Stern officially became the NBA commissioner, and the Lakers went 54-28 that year. As we wrap things up with the Lakers heading into the 1984 playoffs, we see that this team is handling their business, taking care of the Western Conference. Meanwhile, the Boston Celtics are trying to do the same thing out on the East Coast, as everybody wants the moment we've been waiting for, which is the Boston Celtics versus the LA Lakers in the NBA Finals. As the Celtics are winning their series 3-1, we see Dr. Buss is listening to this game, but he gets a knock on the door. He gets served with paperwork showing that Honey wants $100 million for him. I guess Honey wasn't that sweet. Again, I think this is the last of her, but we'll see what happens in next week's finale. We see the Lakers are listening to the Boston game. Dr. Buss, who's pissed right now after having that $100 million served to him, he wants to talk to them before they get into their game, and he wants to put the normal routine aside, and he just wants to beat some ass. And he is calling this a one-sided rivalry, which was very true. Boston and the Lakers, it was a very Boston-heavy winning time. There wasn't a lot of wins for the Lakers quite yet between the two different teams. Meanwhile, I love this scene so much. We have Red saying almost the exact same thing about the Lakers, and we get the moment that I love hearing and never gets old.
Beat LA. Fuck Boston. Beat LA. Fuck Boston. Beat LA. Fuck Boston.
The monologues from both actors absolutely gave me chill as Red is talking to the Boston Celtics, Buss is talking to the Lakers, and we are setting up the rivalry, the matchup that everyone's been waiting for, know what's about to happen. The matchup between the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers is considered to be one of, if not the greatest finals of all time. Season 2 finale, talking episode 7, which was titled What Is and What Should Never Be, as it is time for the Lakers to face off against the Celtics. Meanwhile, Dr. Buss has his hands full off the court, and the big question at hand, will there be a season 3 of Winning Time? As we get our old school HBO logo, it is May 27, 1984. Lakers and the Celtics have battled, and they have a history behind those battles. From Bill Russell to Jerry West, same rivalry but new faces. Kareem, Magic, and crew versus Bird and his team, as it is time for the NBA Finals. As we cut to the very first scene that we got in this new season, when we see the Lakers capturing Game 1 and they had to run out of the garden from the screaming fans, but this time around, obviously, we've come to the journey. We've seen what they had to go through to get to this point. As Magic and the team are ready to repeat this and hopefully win Game 2, Magic feels like they can sweep the Celtics. But Coach Reilly reminds him that this was only the first punch that they landed and they have to make adjustments if they want to win Game 2. Now, right now, Magic Johnson is buying way too much into the hype of him versus Bird, and he really doesn't seem to be focused on the big picture, which is they don't just have Larry Bird. They got a stacked roster. I'm talking about Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Dennis Johnson. This was a really great team, and right now the Lakers seem to be underestimating them. As we head into Game 2, the Lakers are actually up by 2 with 18 seconds to go, and they're trying to get that 2-0 lead in Boston. As we see, Magic Johnson is completely controlling the game. He's actually up to getting a triple-double. Now, as a personal fan of the Los Angeles Lakers my entire life, I have seen this play a million times. All the Lakers had to do was hold on to the ball and force the Celtics to foul them so they can ice the game, but unfortunately, James Worthy makes a somewhat lazy pass. It gets stolen. Celtics make a layup and they tie the game. Now in the huddle, we see Magic Johnson wants to play hero ball and wants everyone to get out of his way and give him the ball so he can win the game, as Cap has to remind him to just take in the moment and breathe. As Beat LA is being yelled throughout the Garden, we see the Lakers inbound the ball to Magic Johnson, and for some reason he dribbles the clock out during regulation. Now again, as a fan of this show, as well as a fan of the Lakers in real life, I have no idea what Magic Johnson was dealing with or what was going on in his head during that time. Now in the series, they didn't show what actually happened. Now they showed that the Celtics obviously won that game, but in reality, there were way more unexpected and bad turnovers by the Lakers, whether it's Wilkes going into the overtime, which ultimately they lost the game. I wish they would have shown that a little bit more, but I understand what they were trying to do, which was show that Magic Johnson feels like he's responsible for them losing this game. As we see Mr. and Mrs. Johnson congratulate their son on the good game, even though they lost the game, Magic wants to have a quick word with Cookie. He tells her he loves her before we see the media kind of interrupting this moment, and we'll speak to what that moment means to Cookie a little bit later. Meanwhile, Dr. Bus is dealing with his honey situation as we have a conversation with Bus and Red talking about the game within the game and how they're building their dynasties. As Red is building a culture and a machine that takes the potential and turns it into greatness, and even when Larry Bird retires, they'll have many more birds after he's gone. He's building something even bigger than himself. Now, first off, that line of taking potential and building into greatness was incredible. But secondly, I'll be honest with you all. Now, I'm a Lakers fan, so I might be a little bit biased, but the comment of we're going to have many more birds after Larry Bird retires, yeah, that didn't happen in reality. While they won some division titles, they won the Eastern Conference Finals, but ultimately, it took over 22 years before the Celtics won another title, and yes, they definitely did not find another Larry Bird. Now, with all due respect to my Celtics fans, obviously we know they won that title in 2008. Great team, the big three, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and as well as KG. It was a good team, and of course, as we speak now, they have a good team built. Jason Tatum, who I think is going to be an all-time great once he's retired. You got Jaylen Brown, who just got that big contract, but again, no disrespect to the Celtics, they've never found another Larry Bird. Now, we haven't seen much of this particular aspect of the behind the scenes of the Lakers, which involves Claire and Jeanie, but we get a scene between the two, and we see Jeanie has a brand new look. This new look comes with a brand new boyfriend who plays for the Kings, who goes by the name of Jay Wells, but we also see that her boyfriend just got a brand new contract. She also gave him some information about the payroll, which is obviously a big no-no. As Jeanie tells Claire that this was an executive decision and claims to be about the players and no need to play by the rules, give the players what they're worth, and ultimately it's in the best interest of California sports. Now, I'm not gonna lie, that was a very good excuse, Mrs. Jeanie. It sounds a lot like her father. She's learned a lot from her father, but she didn't seem to learn the message of you never mix business with pleasure, because we know that didn't work out for Dr. Bus. Now, I've mentioned it before, but I personally believe while everything involved in the team, while sometimes it felt a little rushed while we had some of the basketball stuff kind of cut out this season, but everything involved in the trades, the coach drama, the contracts, etc., all this stuff has been phenomenal for me. But Jeanie, Honey, Bus drama should have been replaced with showing stuff like this. We should have saw the change of Jeanie, the stuff going on with Claire, right? Her having the responsibilities of maintaining the momentum of making Los Angeles be taken more seriously as a sports city and not just looked at as Hollywood. So I wish we would have just focused more on this element. And again, I feel like seeing Jeanie make this change in her personality and character was just a missed opportunity to explore this more. As Magic talks to Jerry West about how he's playing within the game, but he doesn't feel like he's actually involved in the game, West tells him that he has a lot going on in his head right now, and one of those things is the issue of the battle between him and Bird. West goes into his battles with him and Bill Russell and how Bill made players better, but West was more concerned about elevating himself as a great player, which he ended up being one of the greatest to ever play the game. Now, I said this last week, and I want to say it again. Anytime we get a scene with Jerry West and Magic Johnson, whenever they're on screen together, it's magical. To me, this was such insightful word of advice from a legend to another future legend. As a basketball fan and a fan of great writing, this scene was just executed perfectly. Especially considering what Magic is about to do, which is put his personal battle aside with Larry Bird and give his teammates more opportunities so they can win the game on the court. Cut to that game 3 where the Lakers beat the brakes off the Celtics. I'm talking 137 to 104 as Magic was in a complete zone. He was dishing out assists left and right. He ended up having 21 assists that game, which is an NBA Finals record. After that game, Larry Bird said in both the show and in real life, when asked how he felt about how his team played, he said they played like sissies. Absolutely love that scene there. Now, this is clearly Larry Bird's way of lighting a fire under his teammate asses. And just in case you all are wondering, that particular game was the worst game that the Boston Celtics have ever had in their playoff history until 1995 when they lost to the Magic by 47 points. Now, I'll mention it because it's obviously a part of the show, but I really don't care about it. But we get a scene with Honey and Bus, both of them having their lawyers. She feels like Dr. Bus conned her into giving up everything she had going in her life, which I don't know what she was doing during that time, but she had to drop her life to live this fantasy life with Dr. Bus, and she feels like she's the first person to call him out, and she actually calls him a fraud. I'll make this quick. I don't really care about this scene, but no, in all seriousness, the plot to me hasn't earned my attention to make me care about this scene here. Cut to the scene where Claire is telling Dr. Bus about this new TV deal that will not only put the Lakers on more TV games, but other teams. Now, this is obviously a win for Dr. Bus because he was one of the people advocating to make the NBA more prominent on television. So this is a great payoff, not only for this season, but also ties back to season 1. Dr. Bus isn't too happy because he shares the news with Claire that he has that $100 million situation going on with Honey, and I love how she's calling him out for that dumb decision, him marrying this woman but not having a prenup. What were you thinking, Mr. Bus? But again, Claire, I really miss her in the season because I like this moment where she's yelling out in front of the office, so I wish we would have gotten a little bit more Claire. I take Claire over Honey any day of the week. Now look, while I don't care about the Honey and Bus drama, I get the point of what they're showing here, how this failed relationship affected other people and him spending that time with Honey and ultimately it falling apart. And again, I just wish we would have gotten more of these moments with Claire and how it impacted people, because I think if we would have saw more of Claire this season and showed other, executives and other people that helped build this dynasty outside of the coaching staff and things of that nature, but I feel like this scene would have had more weight if we would have spent more time with those type of characters like Claire. As we head into Game 4, the Lakers are up 2-1 as they're looking like the Showtime Lakers, and they're taking care of business as the Celtics have to turn up their aggression and they have to match the energy of the Lakers, which they do, which we ultimately get this back and forth game. But as a Lakers fan, yet again, we get to see a very memorable moment between these two teams as we get the infamous play with Kevin McHale clotheslining, taking down Kurt Rambis, which obviously triggered a physical aspect of this particular game, but also just added more to this rivalry. My goodness, whoever decision to put this in the show is genius. As we see Larry Bird stopping Kevin McHale from apologizing to Rambis, I love that scene. He looks at the camera and he tells us, "We got him." This is the point where things change, as we see that the Celtics are in the Lakers' head, and even Bird gets into Kareem's head. Now, the refs aren't doing them no favors as we're seeing the Lakers lose their composure. Now, just putting my basketball fandom hat on for a second here, this scene was so fantastic because while I don't condone any violence, especially in sports, I miss this type of aggression. I miss this type of rivalry and beef that we don't have in the league now, because all the league players seem like they're best friends. They have podcasts together. I sound like an old man right now, right? Like, the game was much different when I was growing up, but this is a different time. I respect the game, but I just miss this type of aggression, these type of rivalries that we used to have in the NBA. Seen this happen so many times watching a game where you see a play like this. What happened to Kurt Rambis is it changes the momentum of the game, and great teams like the Boston Celtics, they take advantage of this. As we see, Cap ultimately fouls out of the game. We see Bird end up draining a shot right in Magic's face, and the Boston Celtics tie the series 2-2. Now, the show didn't show the big errors that Magic Johnson had late in that game that went into overtime yet again. Due to some of Magic's mistakes, after the game, the Boston Celtics fans used to call Magic Johnson Tragic Johnson. As coach, Reilly has no words immediately after his loss, but he goes right into his office and destroys everything. But after he collects himself, he gives a phenomenal speech. They're suckers to them. No prison ball, play Lakers ball, no more tricks. Nothing can stop them as long as they keep their cool and their composure. I'll save more on this particular scene and just in general Adrien Brody a little bit later, but my goodness, this man deserves an Emmy for an incredible performance this season as the Lakers head into the Lions' Den for Game 5. Now, Game 5 was known as the Heat game because it got as hot as 97 degrees. They didn't have any air conditioning, ladies and gentlemen. It was so hot at points that the Celtics didn't even warm up in their sweatsuits because it was that hot during the game. And as we saw in this scene here, even Kareem needed an oxygen tank, making himself look like a dead man on the sideline. And we saw Red didn't make things better for them off the court. Hell, it was so hot that the referee even passed out. And yes, that actually happened in real life as Larry Bird scored 34 points and grabbed 17 rebounds that game as the Boston Celtics takes the lead 3-2. Now we cut to getting family time with the Johnsons, and I like this kind of character moment here where we see Magic talking to his dad, and his dad kind of reminding him to live in the moment and appreciate how far he's come. Meanwhile, we see Cookie is getting a little bit more attention, but she knows she has to kind of adjust her lifestyle because she loves Magic Johnson. Now, as the Lakers face elimination, that's not the only thing on Dr. Buss's mind right now, because the press is covering the divorce situation like it's an actual game of basketball, as we see Dr. Buss faces his team losing, but he's also facing maybe losing in the court of the public opinion of everyone seeing this situation, as we have this really kind of sentimental moment between Jeannie, who ends up coming to pay a visit to her father, and we see Dr. Buss couldn't be happier to be getting this visit from her. As Jeannie tells him that she loved the fact that her dad was able to buy the team because she was able to spend more time with him, but then she talks about how he kind of wants convenient moments of how he treated his kids, and Jeannie making him go to the game was such an earned moment, not only because we know what their relationship looks like, but I think this was an earned moment because it goes back to season 1, and I'll give credit to season 2 because if you think about that scene when they were playing Monopoly at game night, she feels like she's always forgotten. So I feel like that was just a really, while it was a quick scene, it was a really earned scene between a father and his daughter. As we head into game 6, the big question at hand is, will Kareem play, because he has a crazy migraine going on and this might cost him the game. As we see Magic Johnson having a one-on-one moment with the Cap, Cap tells him that when he's in pain like this, he likes to take it out on white boys, and he meant that because we see the Lakers tie the series 3-3 and they end up winning the game 119-108. Now again, a little critique, but they didn't show the actual game because the Lakers were able to answer the aggression that the Celtics gave them in the last game, and that really helped them in winning the game. And even though Cap had a migraine, he ended up getting 30 points and 10 rebounds to win that game as well. We cut to a really funny moment here between Larry Bird and his mom as she talks about who her 2 favorite players are, one being Magic Johnson and number 1 being Bill Laimbeer, which if you are a Bad Boys Pistons fan, you know the history between the Celtics and the Pistons. A quick glimpse into the future with Jeannie sitting in her father's seat. We also see all the main players being prepared and getting ready for less than 12 hours, one of the biggest challenges of their basketball careers up until that point. As it is time for game 7, 48 minutes to settle a score for a game that started before these players were even Lakers. Will they take care of unfinished business is the question that Pat Reilly has for his team. Now normally you might get one great monologue from a main character, but in this moment we get 2 from Adrien Brody as Pat Reilly, as he gives this incredible speech about unfinished business. Man, that speech had me wanting to get my sneakers and jersey out of the closet and lace up for game 7. That was a hell of a speech by Pat Reilly. As we see, the game is going Boston's way and the Lakers are losing by 14 with 8 minutes to go. As we see, the Celtics are celebrating a little bit too early. The question is, do the Lakers have one last punch left inside of them? We see the Lakers make a big fight, and they fight for their pride right now, and they're fighting for one another. As we slowly see them cutting away at the lead, they're down 5 with less than 2 minutes to go. With a minute and 12 seconds left on the clock, the Lakers are down 3. The crowd's going crazy. Beat LA, beat LA. Now, I know what happens, but this show still managed to keep me on the edge of my seat after seeing what they did to get to this point. We see Magic gets a stop on Bird, but unfortunately, we see a turnover on one end that ends up getting called a foul. We see the Celtics are now celebrating because the clock's winding down. The Lakers know that they're about to lose, and they ultimately do lose this fantastic game 7, which, if I'm being honest, I wish we could have spent a little bit more time on the minutia and the more details of timeouts and big plays, but hey, I get it. You only got a certain amount of time. I still think they captured the essence and the intensity of this game 7, but I wish we would have gotten a couple more scenes to really show you how intense this game really was. As ultimately the clock winds down and the Lakers lose game 7 to their rivalry Boston Celtics, the fans are storming the court, the Celtics win, and there are punches being thrown, and yes, this did actually happen. One of those punches by Kurt Rambis, who landed on the fan, which ended up being a lawsuit. The rivalry was like no other that we've seen before. None of that matters because again, the Celtics win the championship. We see them celebrating Larry Bird, which they didn't show. He actually won the MVP of that series. And just speaking to the series and how big it was for the game of basketball, this was the 8th time in NBA history that the Celtics and the Lakers met in the finals, with Boston winning each time. But this was their first championship that the Celtics were able to claim on their home court since 1966. As we wrap up the episode with the big questions, is this the beginning of the end for the Lakers? Can their young superstar Magic Johnson and their veteran Kareem get them back on top to finally beat the Celtics, as the final shot of this season 2 shows Magic Johnson alone in the showers after defeat. So to me, this episode was great. They knew to focus on this series, and while they did cut between some of the character moments that we discussed in today's breakdown, I love that they show what happened on the court. Now again, there were some moments I wish they would have showed more, but again, it captured how intense it was and how great it was between these two great teams. The episode MVP for me has to go to Pat Reilly, and I'll give some love to Jeannie because I thought that she had some really great moments in this episode as well. But sharing my overall thoughts of this second season, I love, and I mean love this season, showing all the behind the scenes drama, whether it was trades, signing new players, drafting players, waiving players, a 25 for 25 years contract, and winning the championship, losing the championship, and ultimately building to the great rivalry, getting to that finals. And I loved how much Larry Bird was involved in the season, and Red, of course. They were both fantastic. And like I've said in previous reviews, that even last week, which was a great episode, I feel like they kind of skipped over some things, and I felt like some of the more minutia and some of the off the court things could have been played out more. And forget all that honey and buzz stuff, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I want to put a spotlight on the basketball of this show, which I thought was excellent. I'm talking about giving credit to the writers, the directors, and obviously the actors, of course. But the direction and the choreographed scenes that they captured, the actual basketball scenes, deserves all the credit in the world. Now, getting to my main issue with this season, y'all might know it already, but just in case you don't, everything involving Honey, Dr. Buss, and Jeannie, to me, and obviously throwing in their brothers, the boys drama, in reality, I didn't think that that stuff had much of a closure, especially the divorce. We don't even really, I mean, I know what happens, but the show doesn't show you what happened. And the brothers, the boys, were completely missing for the last 3 to 4 episodes of this final season. Now, to be fair, John C. Reilly and all the actors involved in those scenes were great, but as I said in my earlier breakdown, I feel like all that screen time could have been spent elsewhere. So right now, I'll be honest with you all, I'm torn between which season I prefer more. Like, I love all the basketball stuff more in this season, but I think season 1 had more of a character-driven story, and I feel like both performances were great in both seasons, but I feel like season 1 was able to capture the basketball stuff and the great off-the-court stuff, and this season did the greatest stuff with the basketball stuff, the behind-the-scenes of trading contracts, but the character stuff, wasting so much time on Buss and Honey, to me, I think I might lean towards season 1 being just a little bit better, but let me know your thoughts on that. And I'll just finish on these few points here. Now, while this character got on my nerve, shout out to my boy Jason Segel as Paul Westhead. He did a phenomenal job. So when it comes down to my season MVP, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to have to give it to a two-way tie. I'm going to give one side of that MVP to Pat Reilly, played by Adrien Brody, who I think deserves to get some nominations when it comes to Emmy season. But also, shout out to Quincy Isaiah. I thought that he was great in season 1, but I feel like he elevated himself as an actor in season 2. So those are my 2 MVPs for this entire season. Shout out to Pat Reilly, played beautifully by Adrien Brody. But shout out to my man Quincy Isaiah, who played Magic Johnson. Now I'm going to end this video by saying I believe that this was one of the best shows so far this year. I want to thank everyone who liked these videos, shared these videos, and left your comments on all the weekly breakdowns. Now this is closing one door on this show. For all my movie fans out there, keep an eye out for my out of theater reactions for all my up and coming early critic screenings, as well as all of my full movie breakdowns. And I'll be covering the remaining episodes of Only Murders in the Building season 3, as well as The Changeling every week, Generation V, Low Key season 2, the final season of Sex Education, just to name a few things. Keep an eye out for all my TV recaps coming soon. Thank you again for all the support. Help me get to my next milestone of 60,000 subscribers by clicking the subscribe button and hitting that notification bell. Thank you guys again. You all be safe out there, and I'll catch you on the next video.